How are we doing this morning on this lovely day? We got the whole crew. Well, we did have the whole crew here this week. Roll call.
Supervisor Arroyo? Here. Supervisor Wilson?
Present.
Supervisor Bohn? Chair
We got
Bohn?
Peter Frampton working here. Wah, 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 wah. I don't think so.
It's me.
It could be me.
I'm
Me
on.
talking.
Supervisor Madrone?
Present.
Here.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Good morning.
And he is getting introduced to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year, so congratulations, Peter Frampton. Could we please do the salute to the flag? I think you wanted to address a couple things, Madam CEO?
Yes, thank you, Chair Bohn. There's two modifications today. Well, one modification and one information for the public. Item D9 is being pulled and will return at a later date. And item J4, which is the Measure V ordinance, will be heard immediately following the 9:30 time set. So we're going to bump that one up.
That'd be great. Thank you. Oh, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Anybody have any comments on the consent calendar before we hear public comment? If we could have public comment on the consent calendar.
I have someone on the phone with their hand raised.
Oh, good. Let's hear from them.
7718, you may speak.
Hello, Ken Sawatsky calling from sunny Mexico. I did wish to comment on item D2, the Blue Lake Rancheria. They're a really good partner. All the tribes are really good partners for us, and we really appreciate the Blue Lake Rancheria. The people in Blue Lake do. They have all kinds of innovative things they're doing, and hopefully we will be developing a real good working relationship with Blue Lake Rancheria. I highly recommend that the county consider working more with the tribes than they do, including the Blue Lake Rancheria. When you want to get things done these days, let's say you wanted to get your FEMA money coming back, get a hold of the Blue Lake Rancheria and the other tribes and go to Washington, get your FEMA money back sooner. You need money for roads. These Blue Lake Rancheria and other places have people who can lobby for money for roads, either in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. So I just really hope that we really appreciate our tribes, and I'm always dismayed that when we came here, we had all kinds of genocide, and we took their children away from them and put them in schools and tried to take away their heritage. This, to me, was a travesty. I think they're forgiving people, and I think they're great to work with. So it's an opportunity to speak and thank the Blue Lake Rancheria. I did notice that you had there's an alternative to staff recommendation that says none, so I guess you have no choice on this one. Never seen that one before. Project Trellis is getting money. I think that's all Goldbeard's money, so that's not coming out of anything, not out of our Measure S money. I also did notice on D17, I had a little conversation with Amy Christensen, and it sounds like we've got a really good partner to work with there. Cost us next to nothing to have a lot of work done that we don't need to do, and we don't have to have additional staff. Thanks, a shout out for Amy there and what she does in her department. And lastly, I think we have there's some state and federal fund money, but we're only using a portion of it or something there. We get $380,000, and we are leaving maybe $127,799 on the table. So no. Anyway, thank you for my opportunity to comment on your consent items today.
Anybody else, Kelly?
That is all.
And seeing nobody in the public, I'll bring it back to the board. We have a few board initiated, and I think first one is Supervisor Wilson.
Yeah, as mentioned by the commenter, we have a certificate of recognition that we're presenting to Blue Lake Rancheria Tribe in honor of winning the 2024 IAEM USE Emergency Management Education and Training Program of the Year Award. And IAEM is the International Association of Emergency Managers, which Rex asked me a little bit ago, what's that? And I was like, oh my God, I got to look that up. So I did. But this is really in reference to years and years of work that Blue Lake has done coordinating with county, state, and federal and tribal organizations to be a center point and a focal point and a resource for emergency services. And they have done so and served in so many ways, not just programmatically, but also with infrastructure, with their microgrid systems and all those things. And so this is an award that recognizes all the work that they've been doing in that. And I don't see Mr. Ramos here in the audience today, but I do know we have someone online, Andrew Borger, with the tribe, who has maybe a few words to say about that at some point. Thanks.
Probably be a perfect time right now.
All right, raise your hand there, Andrew.
I have both Andrew and Jason on.
Oh, well, that's what happens when I don't have Zoom on my computer. So I'm going to let Jason go first, and we'll see how we can go from there.
Okay, Jason, I'm going to unmute you and
Fantastic. Can you hear me?
yes.
All right. Hey, first of all, and I'll be brief because I know you got a full agenda, and Andrew might want to say something. But you know, from the Blue Lake Rancheria Tribal Council, thank you for the recognition today. You know, the county's been a great partner, and thank you for that partnership. You've been a partner along with us in a lot of the Office of Emergency Services work. And also, you know, with the Sheriff's Department in our MOUs, and I think we've worked well together, and we have enjoyed our working relationship, and we hope it continues in the future. So once again, thank you for the recognition.
Thanks, Jason. Did your partner in crime there want to say anything?
I have unmuted you, Andrew.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Bogar. I'm the emergency manager. I'm the newest member of the team here for Blue Lake Rancheria's Office of Emergency Services. And I want to say thank you for the recognition. It's an honor to, first of all, work here and learn from my director. And I appreciate the recognition and the opportunity. And just wanted to say thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Is there anybody in the public that would, did you have some, no. Public that wanted to say anything on this? Seeing no one, there's nobody online? What? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I don't recognize you in a tie and glasses and everything
All right, we'll
else.
take the
You look
glasses
like,
off.
you look like you're running for vice president in all
Oh, no.
actuality.
Good morning, Ryan Derby, Humboldt County Office of Emergency Services. I want to thank you all for this recognition as well. The Blue Lake Rancheria has been a tremendous partner for us, saving us thousands of dollars a year in trainings, offering those out to the community, hosting exercises, and really just making the whole community better. So I can't think of a community partner in emergency management that deserves this recognition more. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. That's Ryan Derby from our Office of Emergency Services. And they have been a great partner. I know Mike and Steve, everybody's worked with. I've known Jason since they first started construction. And the casino is such a, not a small portion, but it is such a minor portion to everything they are doing for our community. It's kind of a great thing when you look at all the percentages of other businesses and services they're providing. So I want to thank them too. All right. With that, we will move on to a recognition for the Fortuna Kiwanis 27th Annual Business Women's Luncheon. Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Thank you. So last Wednesday or Thursday, I can't remember which day, the Kiwanis had a really nice luncheon at the River Lodge and awarded Lori Garrickson, a 2024 Woman of Distinguishment, and Lisa Hummel and Wendy Hummel for 2024 Business Women of the Year. The girls were very surprised, and there were tears shed, and they were very well deserved. Hummel's has been around for a long, long time and really keeps a lot of commercial rigs going, and they also do service in the field. And Lisa and Wendy are very involved with the community. They do Rotary, Kiwanis, they do, I mean, every event I go to, they are there. And so I was really happy for all three of them.
Yeah, that was a good luncheon. I talked to the girls, and it was kind of a fun deal for them. And they're doing all the same things their dads did when they were doing that. It was amazing how involved they were in an earlier life. It was.
You know, quite a few people knew, but they were actually very surprised. They didn't know, which was great, because when their names were called, they were shocked, and that's always nice to see on their faces.
And we did need to, for quorum reasons, we needed to appoint somebody to the Humboldt Fire, number 1 Fire Protection District, and it was suggested for Carson Vandiver to the Humboldt number 1 Fire Protection District Board. So we appreciate him stepping up for doing that, even though they take care of a lot of our citizens. We don't have a lot to do with it. And last but not least, we have a retirement resolution for Stephen Sauer. Is Stephen here?
Stephen wrote that he is joining online.
Okay.
I don't see him. If he's in there, maybe he could raise his hand.
Got 3 over there.
Yeah, I don't have him on Zoom.
Well, but we have staff people here.
Yes.
You know what's, and I'll tell you guys, just so if you've ever not been up here before, what this happens when they don't show up, it turns out from a tribute to a roast, if you want, because they're not here to defend themselves. So you guys can let her rip, tater chips. Resolution of the Board of Supervisors, whereas Humboldt County Department of Human Services Staff Services Analyst 2, Stephen Sauer, is retiring after more than 22 years. He started as an office assistant in 2002, promoted to eligibility worker. Over the next 6 years, he promoted to administrative analyst and staff service analyst 2 in 2015. Whereas we're going to hear, so I'm not going to read all this, Steve has a lot of knowledge on report writing, always willing to assist, take new staff under the wing, which you guys have a lot of new staff you bring in, and then teaches them the processes and the efficiencies. One coworker said, when they first became an analyst, Stephen stressed the importance of formatting and ensuring every piece of work I produced looked professional and didn't make his eye twitch. Another worker, which is the most important, said he had a great sense of humor. So now, therefore, it resolved, because I'm going to let you guys tell all these stories. I'm not going to do it off print. Now, therefore, it resolved, the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors hereby recognizes, honors, and expresses our gratitude for Stephen's years of dedication to the county, community, and wish him a long and happy retirement. And Stephen, if you're out there, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Monique Upshaw-Smith, the Program Manager for Health and Nutrition Services down at Social Services Branch, and I've been able to work with Stephen for the past 17 years. He's been so awesome to work with. A lot of the data that you all receive in regards to our CalFresh and Medi-Cal programs have come through Stephen's hands. He's gotten those numbers for us, made those reports for us, so that way we can, whatever you're looking for, Steve is always able to get it. So he's going to be missed, and hopefully we'll see him around town. And Steve, if you're listening, can't wait to see you on Friday for the party.
Whoa, there's a party? Well, there's 4 more of you. You got me throw a bomb in there if you want.
Well, I'll say,
Sing him a song.
my name is Alicia Babel. I'm Program Manager for our CalWorks division. I worked with Stephen for the last 18 years. He was one of my co-lead workers when I moved to the CalWorks division, so I really appreciated him. I always was tickled by him because he loves Disneyland. And when I sat with him, he would always listen to the soundtracks of the rides, which I thought was really cute. So just to share a little story. So anyway, thank you, Stephen.
Okay, you guys want to do this?
Ari Chandler. I'm a fellow analyst of Stevens. I've worked with him all the years that he's been with the department as an eligibility worker, and I was an analyst. And as an analyst, trying to learn reports that he does, I have not come anywhere, even scratching the surface of what he does. His sense of humor comes out in some interesting ways, not always straightforward, but it has always been an incredible pleasure to work with that man. He's going to be missed. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. And with that, I'll bring it back to the board.
I just want to shout out to the unsung report writers. I just have to say, the skill of actually putting a report together in a good format is something that takes actually a lot of discipline and a lot of practice. And as someone who's written and read many, many reports, I can tell you that I just want to say, when I was in college, as I put it, I had a professor. His name was Dr. Force, and it was a one-unit report writing class in my engineering program, and it was the hardest class I've ever taken. It had the highest failure rate, but I can tell you that throughout my career and the careers of folks I've worked with, this was a very, very, very important skill, and so I just really want to appreciate somebody who's known to be good at that. So thank you. And for everyone who's been under that person or worked with him, I'm sure you've gained many of his skill sets, and so I'm sure it helps us in every way. So thank you.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yeah, it's really lovely to hear that about the people who are so behind the scenes here in this county. And, we may not get a chance to interact with them every day, but for every one person that is, perhaps recognizable that represents the county, there are, hundreds of folks who are making sure that, data is managed and, information is going where it needs to go. And I'm so grateful for Stephen doing that throughout a long and 22-year career, and hope that he enjoys some time at the happiest place on earth during retirement.
Stephen? I'm actually stalling. I got 8 minutes. You can talk, I can give it back to Mike. He can fill 8 minutes talking about anything that's happened in his last 2 weeks.
No, just congratulations. I think all the words that have already been sent have been fantastic. There was a 6204 on there. I'm not sure if that was Stephen calling in or not.
They dropped off.
With his hand up, but then he dropped. I know, yeah. So, anyway, congratulations, Stephen.
All right.
I'll make a motion
Thank
to
you.
accept the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Kaylee? This is whatever your name is?
Supervisor Arroyo? Yes. Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Bohn?
10-4.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Motion
you.
carries 5-0.
And with that, I will, I don't know what I'm going to do here now, because we don't have anything short enough to fill 7 minutes. We're going to do, but public comment on non-agenda items? Oh, I forgot. You guys, we got the troops coming in.
Hi. Is it time to talk? Okay. So I first came to the Board of Supervisors a few years ago when my sister was in an incident that was very scary. And since I've been back for a different subject, and both are out of necessity of assistance and help, and in times of need, people come to you. And I think that that is such a heavy responsibility and a privilege. I live in Blue Lake, and I, as a community member, have been attending city council meetings. And similar to the responsibility and the power that you hold here, I have seen how the same is can be said for the Blue Lake City Council. And for that reason, I have decided to run for city council. So I'm here to introduce myself as a candidate for Blue Lake City Council. I wrote a little thing for the community members, so it might not, you know, make sense to some of you guys because I referenced some of the community members by name. But basically, let me, pull it up. I'm fortunate to say 37 years ago, after being born at Mad River Hospital, my parents brought me home to be the first baby of the 5th generation to live in our home in Blue Lake. My parents received cards of congratulations from many old-time Blue Lake families, the Nestlers, the Costas, the Orges, Mrs. Mott, which I still have today. My most treasured memories are of this town, and now I have 2 children who play in the same yard as I once did. When I was a teenager, I worked at the snack bar every chance I had. I spent my weekends at the skating rink, summertime at Summer Rec, and swimming in the Mad River. My first jobs were babysitting for local families, and that eventually evolved into me working for North Coast Children's Services as a preschool teacher's assistant and aide. Working with children is my passion. It's what I find to be most rewarding. I'm currently working at a preschool where I get to nurture the future. Almost 2 years ago, I unexpectedly found myself at my first city council meeting. Suddenly, I was experiencing a part of Blue Lake that, although I knew existed, was new to me. I'm now a bit obsessed with understanding more about Blue Lake, and I hope to serve on the city council to represent other people like me. Regular community members who love the town, who understand some change is inevitable, and who want to preserve the small town Blue Lake feeling that we all love. As mentioned above, 2 years ago, I had not been to a city commission or council meeting. I didn't know how to have an issue put on the agenda. I didn't know what a housing element was. I didn't know why certain community members seemed frustrated towards the council. I kept attending meetings. I started talking to other community members, specifically the ones I saw attending meetings and who I saw in past recordings, which I started watching. I read everything I could find on Google regarding Blue Lake. I had a lot to get caught up on. It quickly became apparent to me that there was a lot more happening here than I had a clue about. Construction, community, feeling unsatisfied, sheriff's contracts, new development, zoning changes, an RV park, Danco.
I'm sorry.
People.
You're going to learn about this 3-minute limit. You're done.
All right.
Thank you very much. And thank
Thank
you.
you.
Most of all,
So-
thank you for stepping up. It's not
Yes.
a fun position to be in, and be careful because now everybody's going to want to look at everything you've ever done your whole life.
I'm ready for that.
And then-
I hope
and
that
then-
I hope that that's true.
And then
actually.
they'll really embellish it. So
And I've seen Supervisor Madrone already as a community member, and as a potential city council member, potentially working with some of you other supervisors on different commissions or boards or things. So that's why I wanted to introduce myself.
Thank you very much.
Could you
Good
give us
job.
your name again, please? I'm sorry.
Verda Pitts.
Thank you, Glenn.
you want the old.
Good morning. My name is Ellen Taylor. Before I start my 2 minutes, I just wanted to make an observation. I haven't been in here for a while. The feng shui of this room is terrible. It's almost,
This is part of your 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
I know.
Interior
I know.
decorating
It's
is
just,
included.
It's just important to say. It just seems like the whole room is sloped against the public, and there are more and more screens in front of people's faces, and you really can only see them up on the wall. So it's intimidating. I came in to make a comment on the Golden State Natural Resources DEIR, which is due to come out today. It's a terrible project, and I've brought my own letter and also the letter of a number of environmental organizations for you to review. I'm sure you're aware of the project. It's terrible for Humboldt County and for the whole nation. The thing that I'm going to object to specifically is that 3 public comment meetings have been scheduled before the election. They all hover in the shadow of the election. In other words, people who are going to go to these public comment meetings in Tuolumne County and Lassen County and Stockton, where these wood pellets are going to be taken, will be absorbed thinking about the election, and they won't have time to pay attention to the DEIR, which is, there's a 60-day comment period, but all these meetings for public comment and public evaluation, and to see whether their questions have been answered. And I've got a zillion questions in my comment letter, and also the comments of 109 environmental organizations here need to be answered. It's not enough time. These meetings with the public need to be spaced much closer to the 60-day end of public comment period, and not all scrunched in. It's cynical to scrunch them all in before the election when people aren't paying any attention. So the whole project won't get adequate attention from the public, who will certainly object in any one of these three places and all over the country, essentially, because it's destroying forests in the name of fire protection and capitalizing on the fear that people have of fire, rather than addressing the dangers of forest fire in a way which doesn't also destroy the whole agent of the forests.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me, I have 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
Okay. The agent of the forests in fixing carbon and also providing fresh water and preventing air pollution. Thank you. I'm going to give these to Mr. Miles, and can he?
The clerk, please.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Martha Walden. I'm a member of 350 Humboldt, and our comment also concerns the proposal to build the 2 wood pellet manufacturing plants in Lassen and Tuolumne counties. It's been controversial because of potentially high climate impacts and also potential impacts for residents of the 2 counties, plus residents of the Port of Stockton, where the pellets would be stored, transported, and shipped overseas. So there's a lot of parts to this, and we've all been looking forward to the release of the DEIR, which could clarify some details. And as mentioned, that's supposed to happen today. I don't know if it's out there yet. There have been delays, and it's been a lengthy process, 17 months, which is good. It's good that ample time has been put into investigating the projected impacts. But the reason I'm here is that the same consideration has not been extended to the public review process. And as Ellen already said, the first meeting is scheduled in just 6 days. You know, that's just 6 days to analyze what is bound to be an extremely long and complicated document. The Stockton meeting is on the 30th, and the last is on the day before the election. And that doesn't seem fair. Not only the shortness of time, but also right before this hugely consequential election that is taking up so much room in our minds and could crowd everything else out. Of course, you all know what the casual observer does not, which is that Humboldt County has played an important role in the development of this proposal. Chair Bohn represents us on the board of Golden State Natural Resources, which originated this proposal, and he also represents us on the board of Golden State Finances Authority, which is not only the lead agency on the DEIR, but has also supplied major funding for Golden State Natural Resources. A letter signed by 12 environmental organizations has been sent to Darren McDaniel, the chair of GSF8, to protest the compressed and unfair scheduling of the meetings. I'm also asking Chair Bohn to use his influence to change the planned schedule. And I hope any supervisor who agrees will join in that request. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Tom Wheeler, Executive Director of EPIC. I will say ditto to what the 2 previous speakers have said. This is going to be an extremely complex environmental document. We're talking about 3 counties, 2 different pellet production facilities, and an export facility. It's being released theoretically today. I also have not seen it yet, so I can't comment on the length of the document, but I imagine that this is going to be a substantial document. So I would have 2 requests. One is to send a letter to GSNR asking for public comment meetings, this public opportunity to engage with the project, to be delayed slightly, 30 to 45 days, so that people have an opportunity to read and digest this document before we have these public meetings. Secondly, the public comment period is currently scheduled for 60 days. Again, it's going to fall in the shadow of the election. It's also going to fall in Thanksgiving and winter holiday season. It would be an act of kindness if GSNR were to extend that to 90 days. It would allow the public to better read, understand, comment, and engage on this document. As Martha said, we have a substantial role here in Humboldt County. Supervisor Bohn sits on Golden State Finance Authority, RCRC, and also GSNR. So Humboldt County really owns this project. Even though it's not proposed for Humboldt County, it is a project that we are substantially related to. So I would hope that the Board of Supervisors here would use that kind of relationship that we have with the Golden State Finance Authority to weigh in on this. Thank you so much.
Next.
Hi, I want to talk about the Brown Act. I took time to read it. So, when you have an agenda, right, and then you take one vote to vote unanimously on 17 different items on that agenda at one go, and you do this over and over again, meeting after meeting, you're denying the public the ability to comment. Okay, I got on the phone when you all were talking about agenda item 5, and I got on the phone as fast as I could, and I went through that Zoom process and I raised my hand. And by the time that my hand was raised and I had audio again, you had already voted all the rest of the items off the agenda. Okay, so I was not able to speak on agendized item number 10 because that never came up on the screen for anyone. I'm pretty sure number 6 didn't either. I don't know because I was listening to the meeting on my phone, and when you're calling into Zoom, you can't continue to listen to the meeting and call in at the same time. So you guys are breaking the law here. Everyone is entitled to speak on all of these items, and you cannot just vote staff recommendations down the board. The staff is not elected. You are elected. And we need to hear that you're having discussions about these items and what your points of view are on before you vote on them. You're not allowed to have those discussions in the corridor and in private. This is a public meeting. If you have an item on the public meeting, we should have the opportunity to speak on it. I'd like a response, please. I read that you're allowed to respond to questions from people in public comment.
Well,
I tried to call in to talk about agenda item 10, and I wasn't able to do that because you skipped.
I'm just going to say there's a disclaimer on the front page of every agenda. Please note, those not able to attend the Board of Supervisors meeting in person will have the opportunity to provide public comment via Zoom.
I took that opportunity.
Can I finish, please? Thank you. That would be wonderful. However, the County of Humboldt cannot guarantee that the Zoom system will be available for the entirety of every meeting. The only way to guarantee that your comment is received and considered by the Board of Supervisors are to attend the meeting in person or submit your comments in writing in advance of the meeting after the agenda comes out on Friday. I added that. So I don't know what the issue was with you earlier today, but we bend over backwards. Not everybody does that, but we do want to hear from the public. 3 minutes is not a long time from somebody from Southern Humboldt to get here. So it's very important to us that this works. But I don't know if you've ever noticed, but
I'm telling you it's not working. And it says in the Brown Act that if it doesn't work, that you have to make it work.
I'm almost sure the Brown...
I did my best to call in, and I wasn't able to speak.
That'd be great. Thank you very much for your comment.
You've used part of my time in answering my question, so I do have a comment.
No, you don't. You moved. Your time's up.
I'm sorry, but you don't get to take my time when you're answering a question.
Accept it.
You're required to make it so that people can call in if you offer that service. And when I call in when you're on agenda item 5, and then I can't speak on agenda item 10 because you've already voted it off the off the consent calendar.
I understand.
You're breaking the law.
Okay. Thank you.
You will be accountable.
Please.
Hi, my name is Thomas, Anonymous. I'm here today to tell you about three very sensitive topics, okay? First, cannabis will cannibalize the brains of the youth of America. In Humboldt County, they sell Girl Scout cookies that sell for approximately $2,000 a box or more. A semi-truck carrying a load of them fell over on Highway 36 a few years ago. The truck had more than 9,000 pounds of them. Do the math, that's a lot of money. Kids today are vaping hash oil, which is much more powerful than smoking or eating cannabis. This was found at the county fair this year. It's a vapor. I'll leave that with you guys. I don't want it.
Please no.
In Humboldt County, there are sex slaves in this industry, killing fields, and over 700 missing people. More have been killed, but no one knows they were here. This is a poster from the 70s, The Assassin of Youth. You can read it. Okay? I'll leave that with you as well. Second, sex abuse and murder. I am a victim of sex abuse, as well as my sister, Mrs. Natalie. With me, it started around the time I was in the 3rd grade. The abuse of my sister started when she was probably in the 8th grade. She's 3 years older than me, when I became aware of it. The predator was my 6-year older brother, who I thought was gay and told him so. When I saw him abusing my sister, I was hitting him with a hanger to get off of her. Then I figured that he was bisexual. The happiest day of my life was when he joined the Army. I was 12 years old. He is now living with a male partner, which is much younger than him. Gay men do that. My sister and myself never told our parents. That was a tremendous mistake. My sister and myself buried the memory in our brains. We never talked about it, and we communicated with my brother as things were normal when he returned from the Army. A few weeks after my dad died, my brother told my mom he molested a young boy. She ended up in the hospital. She fainted and later that evening. My sister was murdered August of 2013. Okay, and the coroner made a mistake, destroyed evidence. Please help me with the murder case. No one else is, actually no one's helping with any of this, okay? So my mom became penniless. There was $300,000 lost in a trust account.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay. I could leave the rest.
Yeah, just leave it right there, and the
You
clerks
guys
will
need
get
to
it.
read this, okay?
Thank
I
you.
need help with a murder. Please
Appreciate
help with a murder in Humboldt County. I'm a dead man walking once I leave that door today, okay?
Okay.
And I volunteered for SpaceX, go to Mars.
Yeah.
It's a one-way ticket.
Okay.
I might not come back from that.
All right. Thank you. Seeing no other comment, inquiring minds want to know, draft EIR is on the website now, so if you want it. And the reason it took 17 months is we held multiple meetings in Tuolumne, Lassen, and have had meetings in Stockton, which added to the length because we wanted all the questions that those residents had to be answered in the EIR, so it'd be a, what's the word everybody use, robust EIR. So it's quite lengthy, and hopefully it'll be exciting reading for you. Thank you for your concerns. All right, we'll bring it back to our time set. Since
Hey, Chair Bohn. I have 4 hands up.
4.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank
I thought
you.
you said there wasn't any.
No.
My confusion.
Okay. Caller 5434, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the Board of Supervisors in Humboldt County for making virtual comment possible. My name is Gary Hughes, and I work as the Americas Program Coordinator with the international organization Biofuel Watch. And I too am making public comment in regards to the release just now, 40 minutes ago, of the draft environmental impact report for the Golden State Natural Resources Wood Pellet Export Scheme. To recognize as well that GSNR has signed an MOU with the United Kingdom Transnational Energy Company Drax, has a long history of violations of environmental regulation. We're very concerned about the way that GSNR is moving forth with the public meetings around the draft environmental impact report. And we're requesting that the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors take immediate measures to address the inequities that are embedded in the way that the public meetings are being rushed forward, and in the way, in particular, that they're being held in the shadow of the election. To flag, as Supervisor Bohn, who is on the Board of Directors of Golden State Natural Resources, said that the DEIR has been released. It has been released. I said 40 minutes ago. That said, the appendix for the DEIR is not yet available. Not only that, the required bylaw translations of the executive summary are not yet available. So the DEIR has been released, but it's been released in incomplete form. And at the same time, we see that the public meetings are being pushed forward in a very rapid manner. That's pretty straightforward. Our request right now, though, of course, we really believe that the Board of Supervisors needs to reevaluate their involvement with this massive industrial project. And in the meantime, the imperatives reflect the letter that our organization, Biofuel Watch, signed, that was sent on Friday last week to the chair of Golden State Finance Authority, that the public meetings be rescheduled for much later in the DEIR public comment period. So it is necessary for the board to take immediate action on this, and we need to see that these public meetings are rescheduled. Once again, thank you so much for making it possible for rural residents of Humboldt County to make comment virtually. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Caller 0620, I'm going to unmute you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Rita Von Frost. I'm here on behalf of Natural Resources Defense Council. On Friday, I copied the Humboldt Board of Supervisors on a letter that NRDC and our coalition partners sent to Golden State Natural Resources, asking the project to demonstrate a good faith effort with public engagement by scheduling their public hearings on a more realistic timeline. California communities and groups have received poor, misleading, and insufficient information on the timeline of this project for almost 2 years. Following that pattern, on October 14th, Golden State Natural Resources released information about their public hearing schedule following the DEIR release, which is today, October 22nd. It is out, with hearings in impacted areas 6, 8, and 13 days following this release. For communities that stand to be most impacted by this project, there has been immediate alarm regarding the sufficiency of this timeline for community member inquiry, assessment, and response. The DEIR is over 1,300 pages long, and as Gary said, the appendix as well as necessary translations have not even yet been released. This is incredibly important, especially for the community of Stockton, which is set to have its public hearing in 8 days' time. The project proponent must engage in public meetings that uphold principles of environmental justice. A good faith effort on GSNR's part to engage in public participation and feedback should consider a more reasonable timeline for review of the DEIR, especially in light of the election and local efforts for voter registration and turnout. I appreciate hearing that the project took so long to develop for a robust DEIR. I hope that same consideration can be made for public assessment and feedback in a public hearing format. Our coalition of grassroots groups, statewide groups, and national partners asked the project to delay these public meetings until 30 to 45 days after the release. We hope that Humboldt's Board of Supervisors will elevate this ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Caller 7718, I'm going to unmute you. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, Ken Sawatsky. Again, it's a privilege to be able to Zoom from Mexico. Unlike that other commenter there, I think the technology is there for her to participate. I get my 3 minutes in just about every meeting on this topics. And anyway, I have no comment on the wood pellet thing. I kind of sounds like maybe might be time to slow that down. I guess that would be my only comment. I did wish to thank Vera Pitts, I know her as Nona, for her participation in the forum here. She is probably one of the most honest people I've met, and she has a great, clean heart. And unfortunately, her life is very stressful now because of, in my opinion, some illegal activities, which I won't go into further detail at this moment. Eventually, the truth will come out. And eventually, those who are involved in a cover-up will end up having to pay. So that's my crystal ball. I just, if you look at financial loss when you're looking at something, it's hard to really put value on certain things. Like, what is each day of a child's life when they're put in a position to be molested and sex trafficked and abused? What would the value be? I mean, some families, there's $10,000 a day penalty. Maybe it should be $100,000 a day. And, you know, when something's actually a criminal activity, my understanding is your insurance doesn't cover those things. So I highly recommend that you fix this problem. I strongly support people who have a good moral compass and a good heart. I definitely know Steve Madrone has it. I feel Natalie Arroyo has it, and Michelle Bushnell. I'm not going to make any other comments regarding that at this time. I hope those three take that as a compliment. You're in a position to fix things that are broken. If they aren't going to be fixed by you, then there are others that will fix it to the state level, the federal level, whatever it takes. So appreciate the time to comment, and I hope you take what I'm calling quite seriously, because it does have serious repercussions. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Is that it, Kayla? Kayla.
One more. Caller 3636, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Paul Hughes, Executive Director of Forests Forever. We speak for thousands of concerned citizens in California and beyond. Since 1989, we've organized statewide on behalf of healthy and stable forest ecosystems, watersheds, and wildlife, and against destructive, unnecessary, and wasteful forest practices. I'm here today to request an immediate change to the public meeting schedule to allow adequate time for the public to review the draft environmental impact report for Golden State Natural Resources Forest Resiliency Demonstration Project, and to provide meaningful public forum and feedback. As lead agency for this project, Golden State Finance Authority must ensure that there's adequate time for members of the public to review the DEIR and its accompanying materials to understand the project's impacts and participate meaningfully in the CEQA process. Public meetings are an essential component of the public review process. The current meeting schedule denies impacted residents and communities sufficient time to review and respond to the DEIR and to weigh in on the project at public hearings with key stakeholders. The current meeting schedule is even more egregious because it takes place in the days leading up to Election Day, as other speakers have pointed out, when news coverage and public attention will be focused elsewhere and places undue burdens on members of the public and local organizations that work on voter education and turnout. So we ask that you delay these public meetings until 30 to 45 days at minimum from today, the day of the release of the DEIR, and with consideration for holidays and the election going forward. These meetings should be recorded and uploaded to the project's website as a good faith measure of public understanding and participation. Given the election and upcoming federal and religious holidays, we request that the hearings be held no earlier than December 3rd to December 12th, or hold the meetings in January following the winter holidays. And we request that GSFA schedule an additional virtual public meeting to accommodate people who can't physically attend any of the public meetings. We urge that the public meeting schedule be removed from the GSNR website immediately, and that a new schedule which provides adequate opportunity for meaningful public input be posted immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Are we going to call? Okay. Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Chair Bohn. I know we're not supposed to comment on non-agenda items, and I don't intend to do that. But I do appreciate the Chair's response in regards to noting that the draft EIR has been posted. But, you know, we all serve on many boards and commissions at the pleasure of the board. And sometimes it's important maybe to bring some items back that we're reviewing as representatives. And I would just like to suggest to the Chair that it might be appropriate for you to set up a future agenda item.
Like the one we had a couple months ago with Pat Blaylock here?
Well, that was a good start, I agree. But I just think that now that the draft EIR is out, it might be appropriate to set an agenda item for our board to review the pros and cons of this particular project, which has some significant potential. So anyway, I just wanted to suggest that to the Chair of the board.
That'd be great. And just, I can actually have someone here probably next week. I mean, I can do a lot of things, but this is not on the agenda, so I'm not sure we can have this discussion. But I know we want to weigh in. I do want to comment on one commenter, Gary Harris, at the beginning. I'll give him credit. He shows up at a lot of the meetings I've seen him at 5 or 6 meetings. He failed to mention that he'd been to a lot of public meetings already on this to help us draft, to help GSNR draft the meeting. So, Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah, this is a question for staff. So, in light of the comments that we received today, the timing of us, if the board was to put forward an opinion or a response or request as requested by that seems, the timing of that seems a little bit short. They were saying 6 days till the first of those hearings, and so what I'm wondering is, how would we, if there was a majority of this board that chose to support that request for an extension, what would be the process for us to do that?
I can
On a non-agenda item.
I can jump in on this, and also we're having a Zoom issue, so we will need to break for 5 minutes right after this. If you're not able to timely get it on next week's agenda in order to meet GSNR's deadlines, then the option would be to call a special meeting.
I will make if I can, make a public request, since this is pointing all at me. I'm not the head of everything. I am on a few boards. You've been here for 4 terms. You're going to get appointed to a lot of stuff, as we see, and we're going to do stuff that, we're one of 40 counties. None of this is affecting what is affecting Humboldt County, but in a roundabout way. But what I will do is I will have staff here next week. If you want to agendize this, I will have staff here next week. They were here approximately 10 weeks ago, I believe, and gave a full report and a chance for all of us to ask these questions. But you guys have got a little help from everybody to ask more questions. But this is why the DEIR is so long, because we had all these public meetings. So in turn, I would request publicly, I'll do it with staff, that we get this on next Tuesday's meeting for okay?
Yeah, I can coordinate, Chair, with you on the timing of that.
I
and to
appreciate that.
make
That
sure-
should answer a lot of the questions up here that are
Yep.
so
And we should
vital
probably
to us.
cease the conversation
Yes,
around
please.
this at this point.
On non-agenda item?
Yes.
Are we working or not working?
We're not working, so can we take a 5-minute break and resume
Sure.
the comments after? Okay.
All right, we'll bring it back.
I had one additional comment for,
Supervisor Bushnell.
I just want to wish our auditor controller, Cheryl Dillingham, a happy birthday.
There you go. And I think Supervisor Arroyo had something to say, or? Perfect. Okay, with that, is the sheriff here? Ryan, are you? Is Ryan here? Mario and Ryan together.
Good morning.
Compostable toilets, public safety risk? Here, anyway.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to present today. We do have a slideshow to accompany our discussion. So again, thank you, board, for the opportunity for the Drought Task Force to present on our Senate Bill 552 compliance efforts. Today, we're going to be discussing what the Drought Task Force has been working on, which is largely the Drought Resiliency Plan, or what we're calling the DRIP. And we're going to be discussing the draft risk assessment that's being placed into that plan. So the point of today's meeting is both to inform the board and members of the public what the Drought Task Force risk assessment entails. And we're also looking to solicit some feedback on recommendations for how to move forward with future short and long-term actions. Next slide, please. Oh, I've got the clicker. Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead. While I figure out how to use this thing.
Good morning. Is this on? Good morning, Mario Calson, Director of Environmental Health. Here as co-chair with Ryan Derby of OES, and also I'm hoping that Bridget Lowry from our consultant, Stan Tech, who is actually DWR's consultant that supports Humboldt County's effort to write the drought, the DRP. Can we confirm that she's available and online? Great.
Yes, she is.
Great, thanks.
All right, thank you for that, Mario. So as a review, the Drought Task Force was established in June of 2021 by your board. And at the time, we were focused on the immediate drought that was pervasive throughout the state. In the time since then, our efforts have shifted towards obtaining compliance with Senate Bill or SB 552. And as just a brief refresher, SB 552, its requirements aim to improve the ability of small water suppliers in rural communities to improve drought planning and water shortage preparedness, resulting in reduced vulnerability during droughts and during other catastrophic events that impact water supply. To achieve SB 552 compliance, Humboldt County must establish a standing drought task force, which we have done. And this drought task force will remain in perpetuity until the law is changed and no longer requires it. And this drought task force is focused on facilitating drought and water shortage preparedness for state small water systems and domestic wells within the county's jurisdiction. We're also focused on considering domestic surface water users in the Drought Resilience Plan, or DRP, as these users face similar vulnerabilities and risks as state small water systems and domestic wells. Again, in June of 2021, the Drought Task Force was established, so we've already met a portion of that SB 552 requirement. And the development of the DRP that includes potential drought and water shortage risk and proposed short-term and long-term strategies is currently being developed now in partnership with the consultant Stan Tech, who's on the phone. Drought's a big topic, and it's not really one that we focus on during wet years. I know a lot of people may see this as a kind of moot point since we're in a rainy season, but the point of this is to plan for future droughts because we see these occur on a relatively cyclical pattern every few years. And really the focus of the task force is to do this pre-planning so when the next drought happens, we're going to be better prepared. We're going to have less impacts from water shortage, and we'll have some strategies that we can implement ahead of time to not see the impacts through Humboldt County. So currently, the Drought Task Force is focused on compliance with SB 552, and therefore we're limited to domestic wells, domestic surface water users, and state smalls within the scope of the plan that we're looking at. But at the direction of the board, the Drought Task Force may be called upon to work on future drought-related topics at your discretion. This slide represents just a makeup or the organizational chart of the Drought Task Force. Currently, it's led by a steering committee that's made up of county departments, including the Division of Environmental Health, the Office of Emergency Services, Planning and Building Department, and as Mario mentioned, he and myself serve as the co-chairs for this steering committee. The steering committee is also supported by other members of the Drought Task Force who serve as technical references or collaborators. This includes the UC Cooperative Extension, the Agricultural Department, and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, amongst others. And additionally, this effort through the DRP is being supported by the Department of Water Resources, who's provided funding to support the development of the plan that we're working on. So with all that background, the focus of today's presentation is going to be on the risk assessment portion of the plan. The purpose of the risk assessment is to identify the areas within the county that are most susceptible to experiencing water shortages and or where residents relying on wells and state small water systems are the most vulnerable to impacts of potential water shortage and future drought. Those areas are going to be considered in more detail during the mitigation phase of the DRP, where we work to identify short and long-term strategies to address the vulnerabilities. Different risks and vulnerabilities are going to warrant different and unique responses, and the risk assessment is going to serve as the foundation for the Drought Task Force to evaluate and develop the short-term response actions and long-term mitigation strategies. One goal of mine through the Office of Emergency Services is to help align some of the long-term mitigation strategies in the DRP with the update to the local hazard mitigation plan that's currently underway. And we're also going to be working to reduce and avoid potential impacts of drought and water shortage events to support the resilience of vulnerable households. So I'm going to pass it off to Mario now to go into the analysis.
Thanks, Ryan. So development of the risk assessment was based on a water shortage vulnerability tool that's developed by Department of Water Resources. The assessment tool was used to evaluate physical and social vulnerabilities within the county using specific indicators that we'll go into in the next few slides. Staff from Stantec, the DWR consultant, has supported our efforts and combine the physical vulnerability analysis with map locations of the state's small water systems and domestic wells to find areas where infrastructure faces physical vulnerability and considered how social vulnerabilities intersect. So throughout this process, county staff have contributed localized information and knowledge to augment the state data and assessment tool. The DWR tool identifies 17 indicators that drive the physical vulnerability of domestic wells and state small water systems to water shortages. These indicators can be grouped into 3 categories: climate change conditions, current and recent environmental conditions, and infrastructure conditions. The data which these indicators are derived from comes from a variety of sources, including DWR, the State Water Board, USGS, CAL FIRE, U.S. Forest Service, and others. Indicators are each weighted based on DWR's assessment of potential impacts to water shortage vulnerability. The Drought Task Force has considered additional data that is localized and relevant to our county in the creation of this plan. This includes anecdotal evidence of dry wells or seasonal shortages, well depth information when available, well production when available, and others. The Drought Task Force also identified data gaps which may be addressed in future revisions of this plan.
Can I ask a quick question about that, or would you rather hold questions till the end?
I'm going to have a slide for questions.
Perfect.
After this one. Social vulnerability. It's another important consideration for the drought resilience plan. These challenges impact a household's ability to respond to or recover from drought or water shortage events. Understanding social vulnerability helps us identify meaningful strategies in the drought resilience plan to meet the specific needs of communities and prioritize those populations that need the most support. We've reviewed these indicators with other leaders of Humboldt County Public Health Branch to confirm that these indicators are comparable to what is used in the Community Health Assessment and other county public health equity analysis. So here's where we'll stop and take questions at this point if you have any.
How many, just overall, and I've only heard about one, I've been called on 2, and they were both short. How many wells have run dry in Humboldt County?
That's a great question, and
got a great answer?
Yes, one has been reported that we know of, and that's a DWR website for reporting.
And that was the one in Carlotta or Hydesville?
Right.
That was very shallow. It was a shallow well.
I don't recall the specifics
And that was
related
about
to the
7
to the
years ago.
design.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but we know through anecdotes and talking with folks that have seasonally dry wells, and those go unreported. We'd like to get a better sense of how frequent that is, but it's all about reporting and how do we get that information.
And you know why they don't report?
I speculate.
Okay, thank you. Because once they get put on the radar, then they're going to get monitoring put on them. They're going to get have to be certified, and most of them were drilled before wells were even needed to be addressed, and so they just don't want to get into the system. And I want to thank Mario very much. We've been having numerous monthly meetings with the well drillers discussing how we can streamline the process for people, especially for replacement wells. So, and I think we're making some headway, so I do appreciate your efforts on that. Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, he does.
Well, I appreciate this work. I like your acronym, DRIP. And if you added one more word in there, it'd actually be DRIP, and that would be Drought Resilience Improvement Plan. But whatever, it's a great acronym. I appreciate when people try to think through acronyms like trellis and other things that have come up by staff in the past. I think those are, it's a marketing tool, frankly. It gives people a handle. As was just mentioned, the well issue is a difficult one because so many of them go unreported. Not all wells are drilled. Many of the wells in Humboldt County are just shallow backhoe dug pits in the stream channel or next to the edge of the stream channel with a concrete cylinder put in and a bunch of pea gravel stuck around it with a submersible pump put into that. So there's a lot more of those types of wells than there are the big drill rigs, frankly. A lot of the drill rigs, you know, the number of wells associated with cannabis really increased from the drill rigs over the last 5 to 10 years and such. But one of the problems we have is also riparian water rights. You know, California has both appropriated water rights and riparian, and probably 99% of riparian water users have not filed for their water rights. You know, so we have this issue of people using water all over the county because they're a riparian water owner or user. And I frankly didn't know anything about this until more recently with the drought and Sanctuary Forest and Salmonid Restoration Federation started working with a bunch of entities to put out some nice manuals and stuff to help inform the community, not only about, you know, what riparian right, you know, how to go about establishing your riparian right, but also storage of water for more than 30 days, domestic water storage requirements, all kinds of other elements that go into this. And as I understand it, a riparian water user, you know, you've got to file your annual use. There's no permit cost or anything else associated with it, but it is that you're supposed to file your annual use. And then more importantly, you have to get a 1600 permit from Department of Fish and Wildlife to divert that water for that use. And then that requires a permit fee and an annual renewal every 5 years. So getting the data is complicated, and I know you know this, to try and actually get a handle on, you know, what's going on out there, because the vast majority of it is unreported, not just wells, but also spring boxes, spring taps, and other types of diversions. So not trying to tell you anything you don't already know, but just to highlight it in our discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Thank you. Could you pull up the slide that was from a couple of slides ago? My question dovetails with Supervisor Madrone's pretty well. This one, the physical vulnerability indicators. So I was struggling to, and I mean, part of it is that I just, my vision isn't as great as it once was.
Yeah, sorry about that. Font size is a little small.
I was trying to figure out, you know, in line with what Supervisor Madrone was saying, where surface water diversions and spring boxes and things like that come into this, because as far as conditions, you know, certainly I think there's the perception that it's primarily agricultural use, but a lot of people are using that for their homes, for individual use, and you know, we do have a lot of that documented. But then, you know, is there a explicit effort to document additional users? I guess was my question that I think goes with what Steve was saying.
There is locally, and we picked up on that, and I think we raised the awareness of DWR and their tool, and I think their tool does not adequately incorporate those users. So we've communicated through our consultant who regularly works with DWR, and DWR has cafes to exchange ideas because all counties are working on this effort, and we locally will be incorporating that data, and we have since added a slide based on our feedback to Stantec about our concerns for surface water uses. And Supervisor Madrone, I really appreciate your comment in that a lot of those users go unreported. So the data that we reflect from DWR is going to show some fraction of what is really in existence, and our community is dependent on water sources that are unrepresented by our slide, which we'll have to address in some way and prepare for.
If I may make an additional comment, along those lines, there has been some nonprofit-led effort to get water rights attorneys to help people document their water right. Some of that has happened with kind of a big push, and I think funding for that has ebbed for the legal assistance piece, which is a big component of it, because I think a lot of people bought property and were told it has a surface water right, and maybe come to find out that they have to file for it and go through a process to document their water right, that it's not just implicit with the property. So anyway, I think when it comes to action items, identifying forms of assistance for people to do that documentation, so that it is then an asset for their property once they have documented that actual water right. But that might be an opportunity to find technical assistance for folks in the future.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yeah, so when you look at a map of the county and you look at all the parcelization that we have, if you're not in a community service district or in a city water supply area, all of the other parcels throughout the entire county, if they're occupied, are using water. And it's primarily springs and spring taps and sometimes surface diversions. So if the property is occupied at all, that's going on all over the county, thousands and thousands and thousands of those activities, right? So it is a huge component of our water use, basically.
So we're going to show some more slides, and guaranteed you're going to have some more perspective about those slides I show. But feel free.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment. When you purchase a piece of property and there's a spring on there or there's a water right, it's on the deed. Most all raw properties have deeded springs or deeded water access rights. So it's not. I don't know if my colleagues are saying people are taking water. I don't know what they're saying actually, but those are often recorded on the deeds. And have been for years and years in their past. When I purchase a piece of property, I don't buy a piece of property without a deeded water right or deeded access to water. So those are recorded almost on every property in Humboldt County.
I'm going through that right now. You're exactly right. Supervisor Madrone?
Yeah, so there's a difference, and she's absolutely correct. I mean, on my parcel and many parcels, there might be a description in the title report about a water right. But that's not the same as actually establishing that water right with the State Water Resources Control Board. Well, according to the documentation that has been provided in this community by a number of nonprofits working with water rights attorneys, you actually do not have the right to that water unless you establish the right with the State Water Board. So this is an important differentiation. Perhaps I'm wrong, but from all the information I've read, just because it's on your deed does not actually give you the right with the State Water Board, which is the entity who establishes authority over water rights. So it may seem like a minor point, but as I understand it, it's a pretty big one, especially if you end up in a watershed that's fully allocated or fully appropriated, and you have not established that right with the State Water Board. Just because you have a right on your deed doesn't necessarily protect you in that type of situation. So it's something that I was shocked to learn about, and maybe you guys have information about all that as well, but that's my understanding of what goes on with water rights. But again, I appreciate your perspective.
Through the chair. I would, if we could, refocus our attention on the risk assessment and the vulnerability.
I know there's thousands and thousands and thousands of parcels, but I know people that own hundreds of parcels and only have one well or two wells. So, I mean, it's just 35% of our county is owned by state and federal and tribes. So, all right.
Can we pull up the slides again, please?
So I think we're on this. This is going into the findings here. So here we have a map which demonstrates areas in the county that have higher physical vulnerability as determined by the 17 physical vulnerability indicators. Darker areas indicate higher physical vulnerability, and lighter colors indicate lower physical vulnerability. These are the locations and densities of domestic wells and state small water systems. The map on the right shows state smalls in blue and domestic wells in orange. The map on the left demonstrates the concentration of wells within the county. Darker areas indicate a higher concentration of domestic wells. Both of these figures are based on well completion reports that were submitted to the state, and for this reason we know that this data set is incomplete. As this data includes wells for which completion report was submitted to DWR, it doesn't include pre-ordinance wells or unrecorded wells. We also do not have data regarding the characterization of these wells or the prevalence of seasonal shortages, nor surface water users, which we know is important in Humboldt County. And we've added a slide since our last meeting to start to get at that. These are all going to be included as data gaps within the within the DRIP. Here we see where physical vulnerabilities and domestic wells and state small water systems intersect. The blue areas indicate high physical vulnerabilities with lower densities of domestic wells and state smalls. Orange indicates high numbers of domestic wells and lower physical vulnerability. Brown indicates high number of domestic wells and high amount of physical vulnerability, and these are the areas that may need more support. So results of the assessment highlight areas to focus on in the DRIP. We have eastern Humboldt County along Highway 36 and Highway 299, eastern Arcata Bay area, the Trinidad West Haven area, and southern Humboldt generally. Please note that the drought resilience plan will not be focusing on the Eel River Valley, as domestic wells in this drainage are considered in the groundwater sustainability plan. The Groundwater Sustainability Agency has more locally relevant data to support management of that basin separate from this analysis. These are the areas of the county that has determined are most at risk using county data and knowledge, as well as the drought or the DWR water shortage vulnerability tool. So this is the new slide that we requested Stantec produce for us to help us understand the surface water diversions. So in addition to state smalls and domestic wells, there are families that rely on surface water diversions for potable supply. This map shows the location where users may divert water in Humboldt County. However, we have to be aware that this data will need additional refinement. This is our understanding of where domestic surface water users may be, but some of these points may represent agricultural or industrial users, and more work is needed to fully understand the quality of this data for the purposes of incorporation in the drought resilience plan. Note the areas with surface water diversions echo areas of vulnerability identified by DWR's water shortage vulnerability tool, including eastern Humboldt near Highway 36, Highway 299, Trinidad West Haven, and southern Humboldt. This map also suggests that focus is needed in additional areas in southern Humboldt, including near the Mattole River, as well as potentially in northeastern Humboldt.
Mario, just real quick, do any of these numbers change since 10 years ago we were talking 15,000 cultivation areas of cannabis mainly, but of cultivation areas, and we're down to 12 or 1,500, I believe. So if you have a 90% drop of varying sizes of growth and everything else, does any of that come into this vulnerability data that we're providing? And, because most of this is just a wild shot in the dark, a lot of it with what information you have, but that's so susceptible to interpretation. I mean, do we see an issue there, or do we see a plus sign there since we're not seeing these things run dry?
What I hear your question is related to existing
water
wells?
usage. It's on the ground. Existing wells.
We don't know what the usage is. This is
Your data, I
from-
mean, your data would probably, just your simple data of looking at this would be the fact that I doubt there's more usage on those parcels now that they're not cultivating or they're not doing anything except to being domesticated on them. But that's just would be my guess, and I'm not a water expert by any means. But if they weren't having 1,000 plants, they'd be using less water. Does that come into play anywhere in all these studies?
Not in these studies,
Okay.
and we don't have capacity to monitor private wells, and so we have no sense of any of that.
Supervisor Madrone?
So that last map, that's an estimate. That's just predicting where
This
they
is-
think they might be.
Well, we don't know the use, I think was the key point, is that these incorporate surface water extractions that the State Water Resource Control Board knows about. The use is a different question. So whether these are supporting ag and industrial users or they're supporting families is kind of where we need to get better resolution. And the DRIP, the mandate is to look at families and populations that are going to need help. It doesn't mean that our drought risk assessment going forward after the end of this year can't expand that if that's what the board would like staff to explore more, and expand the drought resilience plan as a community and more comprehensive. But that's going to take a lot more bandwidth, a lot more support, and right now, the Drought Task Force is focused on satisfying the 552 mandate.
Okay, thank you.
So going into the drivers, so driving much of the physical risk in Humboldt County is the high percentage of the county that is considered fractured rock, as well as the number of domestic wells in those fractured rock areas. We have high risk for wildfire, which I'll show a slide about, and multiple dry years for much of the county. And along Humboldt Bay, communities are facing sea level rise, which can impact aquifers due to associated saltwater intrusion. So here's a slide showing parts of the county that are categorized as fractured rock. Most of the county is considered fractured rock. So water supplies in these areas are complex to monitor and as such introduce uncertainty for those depending on them as a primary water source. The intricate network of fractures make it difficult to gauge water quantity and sustainably accurately. Sorry, that's me. I hear an echo. So it's difficult to monitor and much different than when compared to alluvial formations. It's apples and oranges and really hard to tease out what's going on in those fractured areas. So here's a slide that shows the relative potential for high-intensity wildfire, which of course can damage and destroy built infrastructure, impact ecology, and can impact water quality and stress water resources. This slide shows the number of dry years within the past 5 years. The count of dry years within that time period indicates how often precipitation has been below average in recent years. The higher count suggests a greater immediate risk of water supply vulnerability. A higher count of dry years could signal a potential near-term challenge in meeting water demands. So the majority of the counties experience at least one, with most of the county experiencing 2 or 3, and in some cases 4 dry years in the past 5. Here we're showing a mid-century projection of saltwater intrusion into the coastal aquifer due to sea level rise. Saltwater intrusion into the coastal groundwater already affects water supplies, but it could become more widespread due to climate change. This is the case for domestic wells, state smalls relying on groundwater for drinking water. Humboldt Bay is experiencing some of the fastest rates of sea level rise anywhere on the West Coast, which may have impacts on water users. And this is especially important along the East Bay. Social vulnerability is a variable in the county priority areas. It's important to remember that areas with high social vulnerability may be less able to respond effectively to water shortage events. Understanding what's driving these vulnerabilities will help create customized strategies to support communities of need. Using data pulled from the U.S. Census, we found that these high scores are due mostly to rates of poverty, high rates of unemployment. There are substantial numbers of seniors and people with disabilities in many of these areas. Lastly, households without access to a vehicle, especially in a rural community, can make it transportation or access to support extremely difficult. So we're revisiting this slide and identifying 5 priority areas at this point. And again, this is a draft. We're still working towards refinement of our draft vulnerability assessment. Highway 36 area around Bridgeville, east to the county line, is very rural, high density of wells, and all those wells in fractured rock and dominated by medium-high social vulnerability ranking. Similarly, along the 299 area, also rural, high density of wells and fractured rock, medium and medium-high social vulnerability ranking. This got mixed up. No, this is the same. Along eastern Humboldt Bay, of course, the saltwater intrusion is an issue to think of. And also there's public water along the eastern bay, which is available, but in between areas of that public water system, there are a lot of families and parcels that are reliant upon on-site wells. And so we need to tease out where there's some strategies which resources available to support those families. Again, this is the Trinidad area. Trinidad West Haven, public water is available in some parts of West Haven and Trinidad, but many residents are relying on wells that have physical vulnerabilities. Many wells draw from 20 to 40 feet below ground surface. Well productivity is often low. Drillers struggle to find productive water wells, and there are folks that are reliant upon surface waters. Southern Humboldt, similar to the area around Willow Creek, rural, high in physical vulnerabilities, and has areas of high and medium-high social vulnerabilities. So support of each area will be different and need consideration of local challenges. Hand it back to Ryan to wrap us up here. Thanks.
So I'm just going to discuss next steps and a few ways for people to engage with the process and stay informed. So far, we have completed 2 drought task force meetings, which have been focused on kickstarting the process of the risk assessment and the DRP development. And we've also conducted an outreach meeting with a number of local partners to provide the same information that we provided today and solicit that community feedback. Because we don't want this to be a county-only plan. It has to be a whole community plan where we're getting input from all the impacted areas and from the impacted partners. We're aiming to have a meeting in early December that's going to be taking the results of this draft risk assessment and then exploring a little bit further what the short-term and long-term strategies are going to be. So the current work that the Drought Task Force is doing is going through a proposed list of short and long-term actions and ranking those for priority in Humboldt County based on the areas identified in the risk assessment. So at this point in the process, it's a really critical point to provide your local feedback, your local knowledge of the areas that you represent, and give us some ideas on what short-term and long-term strategies would be most beneficial for this plan and for the community. And right now, the goal is to have the completed draft of the drought resilience plan done in Q1 of 2025. For those of you that are interested, up at the top of this slide in blue, we've developed a county webpage that'll have a copy of this slide. It has an overview of what the SB 552 mandates are, as well as some actions that the team is working on right now. And there's also contact information for myself and Mario, as well as the Stantec team, if you have questions after today's report. But with that, I just want to, again, thank you guys for the time today. I know, I mean, not to do a pun, but I know this material can be a little bit dry. And it is really important as we move forward in this plan to get feedback and make sure that we have solid mitigation strategies moving forward. But that concludes our report.
Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Madrone.
Well, thank you both for your work on this. It's such important work in our community, and I appreciate it. You know, the fractured rock, very important element. In addition to that, soil types, right? So clay hard pans, as you mentioned, in the Trinidad West Haven area and other areas, we have a lot of these 20 to 40 foot deep wells, which are typically sitting on clay hard pans. That's why they have that perched water table, which is not super reliable, but that, you know, so soil types is a nice overlay, you know, and especially with clay hard pans. I'm going to go ahead and take you up on your offer and submit comments to you guys in regards to my district that I'm familiar with, as well as other areas of the county that I'm familiar with. But, you know, just a couple of quick ones. Distributed storage. You know, during the drought years, just a couple of years ago, they come and go pretty quickly. There was a lot of grant monies happening for municipalities, adding more tank storage and other types of activities. So that's something I think we really need to beef up with support from the state, is more and more grants for distributed storage, where literally every household ought to probably have a 5,000 gallon tank with rainwater collection. But one of the deterrents or disincentives to all of that is that currently many types of water storage are taxable as a property improvement. So that disincentivizes people from wanting to add more storage. This is something that Supervisor Bushnell and I have had quite a few conversations with Senator McGuire and his staff and others. There was a bill that did provide a property waiver. I think it's really only for urban areas, if I'm correct, on
It was.
hard tank storage with water off a roof. So it's a very limited area of property tax waiver, and we really need to expand that. From my perspective, I think many people's to include ponds and all kinds of rainwater collection systems, not just in urban areas, but in rural areas as well. The more we incentivize it, the more people will put in this storage, and the more resilient those households will become in terms of drought situations. 5,000 gallons can get you through quite a few days of a drought period, actually a couple of months, depending on, you know, the household use and things like that. So those are a couple of areas. Another one is groundwater recharge. You know, there's been some really great work happening in southern Humboldt with Sanctuary Forest, the Salmonid Restoration Federation, working with landowners to do groundwater storage, including the Marshall Ranch, which put in a major groundwater recharge basin in Redwood Creek to try and help with the low flows for coho salmon habitat in particular. But there's a lot of opportunity for those, and frankly right now most of that stuff's very disincentivized with the way we permit things and tax improvements and stuff like that. So again, I'll go through and spend some time and give you a lot more details in regards to things that I'm seeing. And you may know this, but in Patrick's Point and Big Lagoon, they're experiencing saltwater intrusion into their wells. So with increased development, and with wells in particular, not only is it an issue of this fractured rock, but when you get an earthquake and you've got a casing going down, that casing can shift. And the static water level in those wells can change dramatically. Typically it goes down, not up. And so Patrick's Point and Big Lagoon in particular, those small CSDs have experienced dropping static water levels and increased saltwater intrusion into the bottom of their well. So they're at a very precarious kind of a balance in terms of what they're working with up there. And yet immediately upslope, there's all kinds of springs on Green Diamond land that, through cooperation with that company who's been very cooperative in this kind of stuff, there's opportunities with grant monies to actually tap something that's far more reliable and cleaner and doesn't have saltwater intrusion issues. So each community is a little different on what it might be looking at for some of these solutions, but again, I'll take the time to submit. Thanks for your presentation.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Could either one of you email me who's on that committee, please?
It's them.
It's not just them.
Yes, will do.
Thank you.
Supervisor Arroyo.
I understand, from the earlier conversation, the matter of the, deeded water rights, and I think it's in some cases just because of subdividing properties and transferring water rights to other users, or because of appropriative water rights. It's a little bit more complex in certain watersheds, and so I think that I continue to think that finding technical assistance support for people who don't have clearly documented riparian or surface water right is still useful for those areas where those are really impacted uses as well.
Supervisor Wilson.
Thanks. I appreciate that there was at least a bit of connectivity between fire risk and drought issues, as I guess the sort of stacked risk factors, and I'd say it's, can become exponential actually in their effect on one another in these communities. I'm also, and then I heard what you said about the shift, the climate change shift. Is that also being considered in these discussions, whether it's fire risk or drought, and maybe the combination of the two?
So currently with the SB 552 compliance effort, that's not one of the major considerations. However, there is a secondary project happening right now through the update of the hazard mitigation plan that has a heavy climate change component, and that will tie in really nicely with identifying future projects that minimize the impacts of future climate emergencies, as well as kind of crosswalking between the drought resilience plan, the hazard mitigation plan. So it's not directly through the drought task force, but it's I guess a parallel effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because we have existing development, and then we have what could be future development, and so we're talking about mitigating what exists, but how are we talking about addressing what could be? And is that also part of the policy discussion that you guys are having?
Not yet. Currently, we're really focused on 552, and the 552 mandate for counties is focused on state small water systems and domestic wells. I think that climate change is addressed through the symptoms of climate change, of that fire risk assessment, which you referred to, and that was U.S. Forest Service data. And yeah, I can't talk too much about that. I'm not sure if it's worth asking Bridget from Stantec, who's available. We could get into the details there, but she's more familiar with the DWR tool and how DWR ranks climate change and develop the weighting of those measures. So I can't talk about that to the ability that she could. So,
excuse me, Bridget does have her hand raised and was.
And and no offense to you guys, I imagine Stantec's doing the yeoman's part of this work because you guys have such busy schedules and they're probably overlooking their work. Not to downplay anything, but that's why I want to thank Stantec, and that was my next thing. She's here, we're paying her. Let's listen to her.
We're not paying her; the state's paying her.
Someone's paying her.
Yeah.
Which means we're paying her.
Right.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Mario, and good morning, supervisors. I'm pleased to be here at the Humboldt County Drought Team. And I wanted to confirm that climate change conditions are incorporated under the DRIP as it currently stands. There's a number of indicators that relate directly to climate change. Most notably, the DWR tool does include projected temperature shift throughout the county, the saltwater intrusion into the coastal groundwater as a result of sea level rise, and wildfire increase. So those are all data sets that look at future conditions that may occur under climate change from a variety of different data sets and studies conducted with university partners and the state. I'm happy to provide information about those direct data sources and about which projection models are used, and I can follow up afterwards with those exact studies.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your work.
Great. And also, a little bit of just more of a commentary on the reporting part of this. I mean, I can imagine, and I do know people that have had their wells dry up or their water sources dry up. They're not reporting it to anybody. They're just dealing with it. They're just moving on. I mean, and we can see that in water trucks moving through our communities. That is, a function of not having enough water in certain places. That's why those things are moving around. And so it does exist. It's real. And in drier times, it seems to happen more and more. And then there's an impact within our watersheds associated with that. And as you guys know, it's hard sometimes to even regulate who's got the water, not who has the water truck, but where the water trucks are going, what's going on with that, and what impact that has in terms of the draw for that. So there's some regulatory issues around that, or at least data issues. And then also, I think some folks may not, you may not want documentation of your wells drying up in terms of disclosure issues, in terms of future, property transfers and those sorts of things. And so I can understand why there's a disincentive to, or even just not even knowing. I mean, I would imagine many people just don't know that there would be a place that you would report this to, and why would you report it? And so I can understand that data would be very lacking. So those are, I think mostly I'm most concerned about the future elements. I mean, there's the mitigations of what is existing, but I am more concerned about our land use policies moving forward for future development. And I will say that you kind of put it in two categories of agriculture and families. And I don't know, I think residential is probably a better term, because you don't really know what is happening in that space necessarily. It could be, second homes or this, that, and the other. There's other functions that are occurring that are kind of in the residential category that are happening in those spaces too. And some of them are somewhat commercial, or could be commercial, that are not necessarily agricultural. So I just want to make sure that we're accounting for that in those spaces, because I think in some watersheds there have been concerns, especially in other places where there's been an expansion of, say, like the what do they call it? Not the Airbnb, but
ADUs,
the camping, the hip
Glamping.
camp, the hip camp stuff that's starting to occur in other parts of the states. We have a little bit of it here, but there's definitely been concerns where neighbors have seen, differences in water use associated with those sort of commercial activities that are not necessarily residential or not necessarily agricultural. So I want to make sure that we're accounting for that in our policy discussions around this. That being said, I'm just super grateful that we're doing this work, that you guys are doing this work and the outreach that you guys are doing. So thanks for this report. I really appreciate it.
Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chair. Bridget, thank you for being here today. Appreciate your role in all this. I'm curious, in the wildfire impacts, if your modeling or your discussions are looking at what is well known to be that after a wildfire, you can actually have an increase runoff for a while because of the lack of interception. There's no vegetation to intercept and slowly drip that down to the forest floor and increase infiltration, right? So if you burn the area over severely, you get an increase in flow for a little while, but over time, you've actually got a decrease in flow because of the lack of infiltration and groundwater recharge. So does the modeling that you're looking at cover that kind of issue?
Thank you, Supervisor Madrone, for the question. The modeling that we currently use relates more to the direct impact of wildfire on infrastructure, as well as water quality impacts that can occur after a wildfire. I think you bring up an excellent point regarding the runoff that occurs, and that's something that we can include in as we continue to develop the DRIP.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I was out this weekend, and I was amazed by how many streams and areas we're still running from, you know, not short term, for a long time, because we're running 400 trees on our public lands, which is unhealthy, and that's, you know, 400 straws in every acre. So that, you know, and it's not cultivation anymore. So we can't use that as the scapegoat now. Now we have to just use what are we doing with our forests. So anyway, with that being said, is there a motion to accept is there public comment? Yes. Oh, good. Is there a hand raised? I like having 3 clerks.
Hi, my name's Elaine Weinreb. I live in West Haven, and I try to follow community service district activities in my area. And I'm aware of 3 of them, and this is actually the first that I've heard of this effort. And I was wondering if these gentlemen are making an effort to notify the various small community service districts. I haven't even heard about this in Humboldt Bay Muni, which is enormous. I think this should be more widely known. This could affect a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you. Online? What? Oh.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Have you notified CSDs?
Yes, we have. So
They said
that
that at the beginning.
initial outreach meeting that we did was sent to over 100 local CSDs and partners. We've been in direct communication with West Haven CSD, and again, we've been providing these reports for about 3 years.
Yeah, I heard that earlier. I just wanted the commenter to.
And in all fairness to the commentator, most of these small water boards are run by volunteers, you know, so that's why you probably didn't get it. So, what do I do now? Your side? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I guess I'm chair.
Okay, we have 1 caller on line 2223. I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. How's my audio this morning?
It's well.
Good. Good morning. This is Craig Johnson calling in, and
He said it was what's this?
I really appreciate this conversation and getting all these data points forward. Water is such the lifeblood of the community and is important to keep in consideration as we move forward. You know, one of the things that I want to highlight is what Supervisor Madrone was talking about. And as many of you know, we are a cannabis operator, and we can't touch any of our water over the summer. We have to collect it over the winter and totally forbear over the summer. But one of the things that has been really amazing for our farm in particular is we were able to qualify for a grant from the Department of Fish and Wildlife through our partners at Cannabis for Conservation, and implemented through Madrone Advisors here locally through Rio Del. And what that did for our farm was able to really augment the purpose of our rain catchment pond that we already had installed, but we were able to add gutters and catchment and systems to get all of our rooftops to our pond and to capture every bit of rain falling on the rooftops. So now when we get a rainstorm, every inch of rain will deliver approximately 12,000 to 15,000 gallons of rain to the pond. So that is exponential. And that, in addition to our partnership we had when we developed our rain catchment pond with Stillwater Sciences, Joel Munchke designed a groundwater recharge system that we have still slowly working on getting that implemented. That takes a little more time and energy and funding. But I'm just wanted to share how, you know, a lot of the cannabis farms have really come from one side of the field, and we're really, you know, kind of leading the way to resilience and being really mindful of water usage and storage, and doing some exemplary type projects to bolster our water systems. Thank you so much for sharing this information and allowing me to share my story as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
There's no more callers.
Great. I'll bring it back to the board now. Supervisor Bushnell.
I'll make a motion to receive and file the report, and thank you for all your work that you're doing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Chair Bohn?
That'll be fine.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
And now I'll bring Mr. Ford forward for the forestry review. No. Oh, I'm sorry, J4. Mobile, I'm sorry, and then back to J1. I'm sorry. I got lost. My head kind of dried up.
Good morning, Chair Bohn, members of the Board of Supervisors. John Ford with the Planning and Building Department to present the implementing guidelines for the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. I do have a PowerPoint if that's possible to bring up. So what the board's being asked to do today is to adopt the amended mobile home rent stabilization ordinance implementing guidelines. The ordinance allows that a separate set of guidelines be implemented or adopted apart from the ordinance in order to clarify portions of the ordinance that are not immediately clear. And this is actually the third amendment to the guidelines. The original guidelines were adopted shortly after the ordinance was adopted by initiative and implemented by the board in 2016. A second set of guidelines was brought forward in 2023 that was adopted basically last October, nearly just a little over a year ago today. Coming out of that hearing, there were some comments made by one of the mobile home park residents that there were some inconsistencies between the guidelines and the ordinance. We took a look at that and found that that in fact was the case. A lot of those things had been discussed in meetings that were conducted between the industry, staff, and local residents. But those did need to be corrected and clarified. So staff worked to revise the guidelines to make sure that the guidelines were strictly consistent with the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. Revised draft was prepared and presented to representatives of the mobile home industry and also residents of mobile home parks in May of 2024. Comments were taken at that meeting and additional revisions were made, and comments were responded to and presented at a stakeholder meeting in September of 2024. The result of that work is now being presented to the board. One of the issues that came up during this process is that the department received a complaint that a park that is registered as a special occupancy park has RVs in it. The complaint came in that rents had been raised beyond what Measure B would allow. This park up until that point had not been subject to Measure V because it was understood to be a special occupancy park, understood to be occupied by people living in RVs or in RVs, and the point was raised that RVs should be subject to Measure V or the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. We had those conversations with park managers, really didn't get very far because they believe that they are a special occupancy park, and special occupancy parks are different than mobile home parks. They are regulated differently under state law. The question is whether or not they should be treated differently under Measure V. So we are bringing forward the changes today to present to the board, and the first of the big changes, the most controversial change, is to clarify whether or not RVs should be subject to the same rent control provisions as mobile homes. RVs do fit the definition of a mobile home. They fall under that definition as defined by the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance, not necessarily the definitions within state law. The purpose of the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance was to protect those who are most economically vulnerable. Part of the struggle for mobile home owners is that they own their home, but they're not on property that they own, so they could be subjected to unreasonable rent increases. Whether that applies to RVs or not is arguable, since an RV conceivably can be relocated to another place if they don't like the rent that's being charged. Yes, Chair.
John, with now, and if I understand right, or most of them, I'm not familiar with this one, where they have a mobile home, they're usually separately metered. Is that right? Or they do a metering?
I think there's probably a mix.
Okay, and I'm wondering, do they have that? They don't do that with RV sites because you can't bill for a day, you can't bill anything. So that's built in to the increases. So I don't know if that plays any part. If you looked into that for the 9 RV sites, or how many RV sites you said there were?
Well, right now there's really one that's the primary focus of this discussion. There may be a couple others within the county. Yeah. So let's see. This is a tense argument. It's a tense discussion. One of the things that the mobile home industry argues is that RVs were not specifically identified within Measure V as being subject to the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance, and that is absolutely true. That is correct. The other concept that's been presented is that mobile homes and RVs are viewed differently, and even to a point where what we're really doing is regulating the rent that can be charged to a space, and whether it is registered with the state as a mobile home or registered with the state as an RV does have a material difference. And then there's a lot of discussion about whether or not the public even thought about RVs and implementing the Measure V and voting on that, given the fact that RVs were not specifically called out. So there is a lot of industry opposition to this. In the modified guidelines that's been presented to the board this morning, there are 3 options for you to consider. The primary option is to use kind of a hybrid that comes out of mobile home law at the state level, which identifies that an RV that is placed, this is important, on a mobile home pad for a period exceeding 9 months is treated as a mobile home. And so we've kind of adopted that and said that RVs that are in place for longer than 9 months, whether they're on a special occupancy park or within a mobile home park are subject to Measure V or to the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance. The other thought is that creating the distinction between a 30-day occupancy, which would be a transient occupancy, 30 days or less, or longer than 30 days, and making that demarcation there, or the board could choose just to not address RVs as part of the guidelines, and that RVs within RV parks, special occupancy parks, would not be addressed as part of the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance.
What's the gap time that they have to move out before they move back in? Or could they move from the one site and move 3 places down to the new site and start a new contract?
I mean, there probably are ways around that. We did not write in every eventuality of how it's addressed.
Because that'll be, even for a mobile or a RV that isn't running, quote unquote, won't start, whatever the case may be, pushing it, it'll take a few people, but pushing it to one site to another isn't unfeasible either. Just curiosity, I'm sorry.
That's true. The other changes that were made is to be consistent with the ordinance that only one fair return petition is allowed per year. The previous guidelines allowed a new owner to submit a new petition within that same year, but the ordinance is extraordinarily clear that you only get one petition in a year. And then we have made the request for continuances, and the way that continuances are handled consistent between the fair return petitions and service reduction claims, so that they would be treated consistent with how the ordinance treats fair return petitions. And then another thing that the previous guidelines did was that identified that the only beneficiaries of a downward rent reduction would be those who participated in a petition, and changed that to be anybody who is participating in the program, registered and pays their $5 a month cost, would be a beneficiary of that downward rent adjustment. And then we added a provision. Previously, it had talked about allowing attorney's fees to be recovered by the winner or the person who prevailed in a court case. We've modified that because the ordinance is very clear that only certain attorney's fees are recoverable, and only the attorney's fees that are recoverable are related to preparing the fair return petition. And the ordinance is very clear on that the reason for that is to incentivize the park owner and the residents to negotiate and come to a settlement without having to go through that entire process. But what we did do, because those expenses are allowed by ordinance to be prorated over a 5-year period, is to identify that needs to be reported to the county so that we can understand what the rent increase is and what the additional cost is associated with the preparation of the fair return petition. So that is a change that was added. A couple of changes we did not make that were asked for is that there's a provision in there allowing the hearing officer to consider an agreement made between a homeowners association and the park owner when that may affect the rent adjustment based upon services. And so the idea there is that if the homeowners association entered into an agreement with the park owner and it's a good agreement, that should be considered. But if it's a really bad agreement, that should be considered too. Unfortunately, this is based upon a rather contentious actual event at one of the local parks, and so there is a desire to not see that incorporated within the guidelines. And then there was another request that we, once a fair return petition is determined to be incomplete, that we just reject it and say that it can't be made complete after, say, 30 days. And we believe that's kind of a harsh request, because sometimes it takes more than 30 days to provide the necessary materials. Should the materials be provided with the application to make it complete? Yeah, absolutely. But sometimes there are just oversights and things that happened that need to be clarified. So before the board today is first to consider how the board wants to address recreational vehicles, whether you want them to be subject to a 9-month occupancy, a 30-day occupancy, or that they shouldn't be addressed as part of the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance at all, and then adopt the amended mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, implementing guidelines as proposed with whatever direction the board chooses on RVs. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Sorry, Bushnell.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about the RV parks and with the new ordinance that we have that the RV parks are under TOT, like for instance, Bembo is an RV park. And so how does that work with this?
That would not be subject to this at all, because they're clearly for transient occupancy. This really only applies to an RV park where people are living there permanently.
So they have, I don't know about Bembo, I don't want to like point at anybody, but there are RV parks in my district that have both. They have in and outs and people that are there long term. So how would you address that?
So if they have more than 10 spaces devoted to permanent housing, and the board chose to include RVs within the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, then they would be required to report. They'd be required to have the residents pay the $5 a month fee, and they would be subject to the limitations of the rent stabilization ordinance.
Thank you.
How would this apply to park units? Park units, which are basically tiny homes on wheels that are brought in and then permanently put in. Park units.
So if they're on a mobile home space, that's really clear.
Understood.
If they are placed on an RV space and they are maintained there permanently, then if, say, the board decided that anything longer than 9 months, they're subject to the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance, then they would be required to report, pay the fee, and they would be subject to the limitations of the rent stabilization ordinance.
Okay, and then this would be all complaint driven anyway. We're not going to have a mobile home task force committee at planning a building going around with code enforcement, are we? It's going to be like code enforcement, completely complaint driven, right?
It is complaint driven. It is an interactive process because there is reporting that happens every year. And
right. I mean, we're not going to do an eye in the sky, so. All right. Supervisor Madrone?
Oh, I want to thank you, John, and your staff for working on this. As you know, there have been a lot of complaints about continuous rent increases. In this particular park, the extended stay, and in its own name, it talks, extended stay, right? So I'm very supportive of these guideline changes. I think it really helps to clarify issues that are important to clarify in this ordinance. And I would support the 3 months. I'd be okay with the 9. In this particular case, I believe we're going to be able to go backwards and really kind of work it out since the complaints came in almost a year or more ago, et cetera, and we've talked about that. But I appreciate the work here, and I think it's a good move to clarify what has not been clear. So thank you.
Arroyo, Supervisor Arroyo?
I mean, I would prefer consistency with the other style of units when it comes to the, number of days or months. So, I understand that people take RVs to different places for, the season and might be staying for less than 9 months, but longer than 30 days. But I would still recommend consistency. And I also, understand that for tourists serving, hotels and RV parks and other uses, there are seasonal differences in the rates that are pretty common, but I still recognize that there are people relying on these facilities for long-term housing. So I think it's reasonable to apply these standards to them, and I think we have a a good rationale for doing so.
Yeah, and my problem is I know people that rent camp spaces for 4 months every summer, and they rent them with friends all together, and then they pull out for the winter just because they don't want to have a summer home to take care of and everything else, but they still want the amenities of the lake and everything it offers. So 3 months might be, because they're going in and, they're going in June or May, and then they're staying until September. So, and it's not that then they're staying out there on the weekends. They're not out there all the, they take their 2 weeks vacation out there, probably, and everything else. But they have little compounds that they all camp next to each other. And they're very accepted because that's steady income that the park owner knows he's going to get. So I wouldn't mind seeing 6 months in there, throw 36, 3, 6, or 9, but. Supervisor Wilson?
Let's just for a second entertain the scenario of someone staying 4 months. Does that mean that the park owner would then charge them $5 basically for is that the functional difference that person would see before they left after 4 months?
So if the board chose to make it 3 months,
Right.
and we weren't proposing 3 months, we were proposing either 30 days or 9 months.
Yes, gotcha.
And those are for reasons I tried to outline.
Yep.
But, so if it was 4 months, yep, the resident would need to pay $5, and that would go through the property owner to the county.
Okay, but that is the function. Okay, so
Yep.
say it's 30 days and they stay 4 months, they would pay $15 over that amount of time. That would be their sum total of impact.
Right.
I hear you. Okay. The reason that 9 months came up is I think you had misspoke for a second when you were explaining this.
Oh, did I miss?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So I got it
apologize.
here. Okay, so I concur with or align myself with Supervisor Arroyo and Supervisor Madrone on the consistency element of this. I do think that it does conform with our definition of mobile home, and I would add that even on the other end of the spectrum, and we've talked about this a little bit before, mobile home on the other end of the spectrum can be quite complicated and a big structure. I think in my experience, the definition I've seen at the state level is like, can it be dismantled and removed in 24 hours? Or maybe it's 48. It's some amount of time, very small amount of time, that makes it mobile in a certain way. So for me, I'm good with just making it consistent and not having a tiered approach to it. But I'm not. This is my preference. So.
Okay, so is that 30 or 9 months?
30-day version.
I thought Supervisor Madrone was looking at 9 months or 3 months.
I heard 3 months or 9 months, but 30 days versus 9 months is what I'm hearing now.
Yes.
I mean,
and
My preference was 30 days to be consistent.
I think that the reason we did recommend 9 months, not to be argumentative here, but is because of the reason that since we are a tourist community, many people do come in and leave a trailer for the summer season. And
I know a lot of them.
And so then we would be subjecting them to the rent stabilization ordinance, and the rent stabilization ordinance isn't really to apply to people who are functionally transient or second home. It's really for people who are, that's their primary dwelling. And so that's why going a little bit longer, the 9 months, and that tears off the state law, the 9 months does kind of address that.
Just for clarification, do you mean 90 days or 9 months?
9 months.
9 months.
9 months, okay.
And like Supervisor Madrone, I'm sure remembers, back before all the salmon moved to Oregon, our parks in Trinidad, West Haven, McKinney used to be packed for the whole season. And the guys would come over on the weekend, they'd leave their boat in their car parking spot, and then haul their boat down. So, and the $5 or whatever that we charge for I mean, that's minor. But the thing is, it only gets charged. Most of these people are not going to stay 9 months. They're going to stay 3 to 5 months and be gone, and they can do with it whatever they want with the site after that. So I'd be more comfortable with 9 months. And the problem, and not the problem, but the situation is, if you get 3 mobile homes that you have to have removed in 30 days, their 30 days is up, John. How's your staff going to deal with that? I mean, nothing against your staff or anything, but I mean, they have a burden already. And now we're going to say, would you go make sure this is being moved and what's being done and do a report on this in 30 days, where in the 90 days it'll probably be gone.
Okay.
I'd like to consider staff on this also, because they've done such a yeoman's job, but we're asking them to do more with less now.
Have we taken public comment yet?
No, but I have a comment before we do
Okay.
that.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you, and I didn't realize my speaker was on. I just wanted to weigh in on my feelings as well. I am more likely to vote for the 9 months, and also we're forgetting the large amount of construction workers that come over and stay during the construction season, and they're only here for the work season, which is about 5 months, usually May to October, and so I would like to consider those as well, and there are quite a few of those.
Okay. Supervisor Madrone.
So it's interesting because, I mean, if it applied at 30 days, I hear what you're saying, John. But in reality, paying that $5 a month may actually turn out to be much less to pay than if the rent for the spot went up, even if they're only staying there for 4 months, right? So from a financial perspective, even these short-term people for 4 or 5 months would probably be better off having the rent stabilization ordinance apply to those spaces. That would be probably cheaper to pay $5 a month than what potentially might be a significantly larger rent increase, just from a practical perspective. In addition, I would submit that we certainly haven't had any complaints from any of these 3 to 5 month type residences that come in for work program, contracts, or for fishing at Ruth Lake or whatever it might be. I mean, there just hasn't been any. So if those rents have been going up, the users of those spaces have simply been paying that without any complaint. So I'm not going to push the issue by any means. I appreciate what staff's done here to at least try and make this, consistent. So if from you guys' perspective, 9 months is what works best, then I'm more than willing to support that.
Thank you. I would advocate for 9 months, and one of the other reasons is that 30 days becomes an administrative
nightmare
job for not only the park owner, but for the county staff too. I mean, that's every 30 days you're then dealing with stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think the most important element here is that if we pass this recommendation of 9 months, what we're doing is really providing that ordinance protection to RV spots as well. And I mean, that's the essence of what we're trying to do here, is bring that into conformance. So I think that's a good move, and I suspect that the residents at Extended Stay will be very grateful for that. And as I said, we talked before, and I believe we're going to be able to go back to when the original complaints came in a year ago, et cetera, and make that right by them. I mean, these are folks that are on extremely fixed incomes, and the rents there in particular have been just going through the roof. And it's not a local mobile home park owner by any means, somebody that, is anyway, I'll stop.
I don't think that plays into it. So you gone from.
So I will make a motion.
You're doing 180, you were at.
I'm going to
30.
support. Yes.
I'm going to public comment before I make the motion, please. And I just, yeah.
I have one on.
I know. I was going to ask council real quick. With this, do you feel, and without spending a ton of money on this off of one complaint, are we going to be okay, or what you feel, we're never okay, feel is legal, or will we face legal challenges to this? Because I think we all received letters, and we're dealing with people where their genre is mainly mobile home parks. And you guys, I know you have a mobile home division over there, but do you have enough to are we able to handle this where you think, you know, and in all honesty, I asked him about this earlier. I want to give him the time to speak publicly.
I believe that the proposed recommendations are legally defensible. However, anything that is passed by the board could be challenged.
Throw in the ham sandwich?
What?
Throw in the ham sandwich too? Yeah.
So, no, I do believe that we could defend this. However, there could be a challenge what could potentially be costly, as any legal challenge is.
All right. I'll open it up for public comment. Do I see anybody outside that wants to speak on it publicly in the audience? If not, I will turn it into the one hand we have up.
Okay, caller 8034, I'm going to unmute you and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Alan Stevenson, and I'm with the ownership of the Trinidad Extended Stay RV Park. The irony in this situation is that while the rent increases we have done have exceeded what would have been allowed if this was a mobile home park, the increases have been moderate, around 1% to 2% above CPI, and have been significantly below what we would have been entitled to under a fair return process, given the large investments we have made for infrastructure improvements. The rent of this park is actually limited by the economics of supply and demand, and during the colder months of the year, we typically have a vacancy rate of 15% to 25%. However, I would suggest that because of how this process has transpired, the needs of both residents and owners need to be put aside at this point, and that we should all focus on the law. The ordinance clearly does not apply to RVs in terms of voter intent, plain language, or the law. For years, the county staff followed the law and directed owners to not count RV spaces on this registration forms, and the county website very clearly stated that the ordinance does not apply to RVs. The plain language in the ordinance states that it applies to mobile homes on mobile home spaces. RV spaces are clearly not mobile home spaces under state law, and owners are not allowed to put mobile homes on RV spaces. I believe the Board of Supervisors is being misled and possibly lied to by county staff. While the Deputy County Counsel did reply to several letters from attorneys representing park owners, he chose not to respond to 2 letters from attorney Anthony Rodriguez that were a follow-up to correspondence between Mr. Campbell Blair and other attorneys. The letters from Mr. Rodriguez lay out the arguments and relevant case law and support an overwhelming conclusion that the ordinance cannot apply to RVs. I am guessing that the Deputy County Counsel has not provided a legal opinion to the board as to why the ordinance could apply to RVs. And the reason I know this is that there are no legal arguments that would support this. Ignoring the law does not serve either the citizens or the board. If changing the law would serve the citizens, then the Board of Supervisors has the power to create new law and should follow this process. I would urge the board to pause this process and to obtain a legal opinion as to whether or not RVs can be included in the rent stabilization ordinance. Thank you for your consideration in this matter.
Are you still there for questions? Sir?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure. It's just that I was muted, but I tried to unmute.
I know.
Yes, I'm here. If you
I might probably ask something off the top of our head, but we always throw out numbers here like through the moon, and 99%. We throw out a lot of numbers out here, including me. What have the rent increases have been from the beginning of 2023 to the end of this year? What is a normal rent, and what have they gone up?
So I don't have that data off the top of my head, and part of it is we switched software. But since we purchased the park in 2020, I believe our rent increases have averaged about 5% per year.
Annually?
So they were probably higher in the year when inflation was
8%.
Very significant. But as I said, we have invested around $400,000 into water and sewer improvements there. That if the fair return process rarely works anywhere, but if it did work and if we were allowed to that, we would have been entitled to larger rent increases we've done. But again, it's limited by supply and demand.
All right. Thank you, sir.
But as I said, that's, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Caller 4009, I'm going to unmute you and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Salo, and I'm with Western Manufactured Housing Communities Association, or WMA. We are a state industry association working with mobile home park owners and managers on training, education, advocacy, etc. We're here today to plead with you to do the right thing and reject the staff recommendation to include RV parks in the rent stabilization ordinance that the voters of this county approved 8 years ago. You've already heard directly from park owners, managers, and their attorneys. They've laid out to you exactly why and how the county would be breaking the law by attempting to do this. As we have already made clear through several letters and emails, number one, under California law, RVs are not mobile homes. RV spaces are not mobile home spaces, and RV campgrounds are not mobile home parks. Under California, so number two, under California law, it is illegal for tenants to occupy mobile homes in RV parks. And number three, the county's own forms and websites for the past 8 years have explicitly excluded RV spaces from this ordinance and have explicitly stated that, quote, RVs are not mobile homes. Over the past few months, these facts have been presented to your staff and county council several times in writing and detail. Staff has provided no response. We strongly urge the board not to move in this direction. This action is plainly against the law and will surely lead to costly litigation at great expense to the Humboldt County taxpayers. Instead, we urge the board to move this recommendation from the final draft, remove this recommendation from the final draft of the implementing guidelines that the staff has asked you to approve today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Caller 7718, I'm going to unmute you. You have 3 minutes.
This is Ken Swatsky. I take exception to people. I guess they didn't get the memo, these park owners and things, that, you know, you don't go around calling people liars and staff, calling them misinformed, all these typical words they're using here, in my opinion, are very offensive and they're a very negative thing. I would suggest that if these park owners want to go to the mat and sue, that we just go ahead and we put an initiative on the ballot next time, and we just totally freeze all rent no matter what. Don't let them increase it at all. And maybe they'll just go back down south and go away and just leave us alone here. I think it's within our purview, and the voters would support us having affordable housing with secure housing here, and not-for-profit housing as is being presented to you. I don't like the bullying. I don't like the tone, and the throwing lawyers thing. As far as I'm concerned, tell them to bring it on. We'll face a lawsuit if that's what it takes, or maybe they're willing to negotiate. But if they want to play hardball, I think we should play back. Thank you for my opportunity to make comments on this topic.
Thank you.
I have one more. Caller 7508, I'm going to unmute you and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Shelley Horwitz. I am one of the residents at Trinidad Extended Stay. Very thankfully, I've lived here for over 7 years. There was a comment made about a lot of finances going towards improving infrastructure. It was actually making it so infrastructure was functioning. So they did put a lot of finances into water and sewer. It is my understanding, and speaking with individuals who are a part of that, that those were actually required repairs necessary to provide basic water and sewage to the park. In terms of ongoing issues, we have some of the county's most vulnerable residents here in this park and others as well, who are really struggling to make ends meet and are in RVs full time because they can't afford a mobile home. So definitely a group that we want to continue to protect. There was a mention made of park models and how they could potentially be removed within 24 to 48 hours, which I do think is potentially possible. We have had some residents recently inquire the cost of such a move, and to move one of these park models that have been affixed permanently would be upwards of $10,000. So not necessarily realistic, again, for people on limited incomes who bought these tiny homes because of limitations. So I just want to thank the Board of Supervisors for considering protecting not just members of this park, but of our overall county and community who, many park members have said that they could end up homeless if they don't have access to reasonable rents. And we certainly are working hard as a county to deal with this situation. And I feel like your decision today is one way that we can continue to keep people in our community housed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, caller 5173, I'm going to unmute you and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Hillary Mosier. I am a mobile home park resident in McKinleyville. I'm also the regional manager for the Golden State Mobile Homeowners League. I would like to thank John Ford and his staff for a wonderful job on rewriting and readapting and going through the process of getting rules and guidelines that really do apply well to this ordinance. I would like to say that what the Board of Supervisors is facing right now today is preserving an important source of affordable housing. And I would ask you to look at Yeehaw. There's a huge issue there, and that issue reaches out into all kinds of areas like sewage and electricity. In these RV parks, that's all set up. It's all been managed. It is being managed. The problem is exploitation of this very low-income population who have been living there. Like the previous caller said, she's been there for 7 years. Many have been living there longer than that. So to say that this is recreational for them, no, these are their homes, and they do qualify under the state definition of homes. I really encourage you to do whatever you can do to preserve this important source of affordable housing in Humboldt County. And I thank you once again for the job you're doing. I'm done.
I thank you.
That is all.
I'll bring it back to the board. Very good points being made.
If I could, Chair.
Please.
I'd just like to respond to a couple things. First is Joel Campbell-Blair is on the line. He's on Zoom and available to respond to any questions. Secondly is that there was a reference made to frequently asked question. And if you type in RVs into our search engine, you do end up with a comment that would make it appear that RVs and mobile homes are different, separate. I've not been able to find out who wrote that. It comes from the Treasurer Tax Collector's website. It's not from Planning and Building Housing. That's not something we put in there. So it's not, that was not our interpretation.
We've been hacked. Blame the Russians. John, can you answer just one question? What happens if we do nothing? Since we're operating on one complaint, maybe when we actually get a bunch of complaints stacked, but, there was a very good point made. We're looking about making concessions another place regarding a lot of water, sewer, and everything else, rezonings, everything else in a short amount of time, but we have, from what you said, one complaint. we're spending all this time, and I have full faith in our council that this is defensible. But I don't think we're going to defend it in an afternoon. I don't think we're going to, do it in a day. And I think we're going to do my favorite words. We're going to need to hire outside counsel on this that has the expertise. Sometimes should we weigh the cost of the battle rather than the result of the battle?
So that obviously is a decision that's the board is confronted with. How much value is there in sticking to this interpretation or providing this interpretation, this clarification, and what will it do? Certainly it applies to one park. There may be other parks that apply to. Sorry for having my speaker off, my microphone off. There has been only one set of complaints. There have been multiple complaints that have come out of that park. The net result is that people who live in RVs would not have the protection of the rent stabilization ordinance. The net benefit, the county would not be fighting a battle, which probably the county will be fighting, whether or not we should be regulating the rents of RVs and RV parks.
Do you have an estimate how many RVs fall into this? I mean, we had just a rough guess. I mean, I'm trying to think, what are we chasing here? Are we being penny wise and dollar foolish? And I just I know a lot of these things create heartburn for people, and it's frustrating for some people. But there's a lot of facets of life. We can't fix everything. We can try. We can bring the attention to this. And I think the park owners on the line, if we see a 10% or a 15% raise, consider inflation has gone up over 5% a year, 8.5%, 2 years ago. It's scheduled at 3%, I think, this year. So I'm just saying, as this goes, and then there is that evaluation for park improvements, pavement, water, infrastructures can be stretched out so they get an ROI. Otherwise, they're not going to, improve things.
Right.
Are we being, it's not our money. We talk about, well, let's get a grant from the state and do this and everything else. The state's broke. They're not throwing a lot of money our way. So we're going to have to realize we got to do this on our own. So I don't know, is there a way we can, I'm not sure what I'm looking for here, but I'm just saying it seems like we're chasing a lot of stuff that really may not even, we're estimating, we're thinking this might happen, we're going to run out of this, run out of that. And we've estimated, and, so I'm just saying, is there a way we can do this? And it always comes up, they're out of town, or they're, they've got the money, they can afford it. That's not always the case. I mean, most of our big projects are not out of town, they're out of country people, and we're embracing them. So I think that doesn't come into the argument. It's about getting things done in Humboldt that work best for our citizens, So
I don't have a good number for you. There's less than 100 within the park in Trinidad. If there's 3 parks of similar size, we're probably talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 to 200 total units in the entire county. That's probably on the high side. One option before the board may be to not include it in the guidelines at this point, and then direct staff to take a look at this from an ordinance standpoint and see if get better numbers, see if there's something that needs to be addressed there in a modification either to the mobile home rent stabilization ordinance or to adopt a different ordinance. We're confident, and Joel Campbell-Blair can speak to this, that the interpretation, the clarification is there, that RVs do fall under the definition of a mobile home. But it comes down to a policy decision.
Comes down to a policy and a team of lawyers on two sides.
Correct.
I mean, and I'm figuring, I'm just doing the math in my head over so many years, we're probably talking $300,000-$400,000. I mean, if we hit $300,000, we'd be better off giving, you know, quite a bit of money just to those to those people and just supplementing their rent for 2 years, rather than paying lawyers and helping people live. And we're talking less than, we're not talking a big figure when we're talking the figure. We're talking about paying lawyers. So I'm just throwing it out there and just trying to get answers.
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Madrone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, I appreciate, or Director Ford, I appreciate you bringing up that this is actually multiple complaints from one park. It's not just one complaint. I mean, I've had dozens of people from that park talk about what a burden this has been on them, the increased rents that are above and beyond what could have been charged. You know, the rents vary based on when they started renting and what was available by the market at the time. So if you started brand new, that, you know, that first year, that first month you rent could be any number of things based on market conditions. And then they went up from there. So in talking to the residents, their rents vary tremendously across the board. Lower for those that have been there a while and higher for those that just moved in. But it is multiple complaints. And, you know, we sit up here as a board talking about trying to support affordable housing all the time. This is what this is. This is affordable housing, living in RVs with stabilized rents. So I don't think we need to argue that. And I actually think we owe it to the people of the community, this one and others, to do everything we can to support affordable housing, which this actually is. So much of what we call affordable housing is not. I also appreciate that County Council has reviewed all of this and find via the memo that was provided to all of us that it is in fact defensible, as was mentioned here by our council, that their assessment of this particular situation is that it is defensible. Does that mean we're going to get sued? Probably, but I appreciate that the analysis is that it's defensible. And I think we owe it to our low-income people in the community to clarify our guidelines. So I will make a motion to adopt the revised guidelines, making RVs subject to the MHRSO, and use the 9-month item for calculating those things. So does that cover everything that you're looking for? Okay.
Yes.
I'm sorry, was that something, Arroyo, you were?
She seconded it. Supervisor Wilson?
Supervisor Wilson?
Thanks. I don't.
I think Supervisor Arroyo had something to say, I believe, didn't you?
Second.
Nope, I just seconded it.
Okay. Nobody else had anything to say? Mike?
Thanks for calling me out there.
It's the co-chair.
I think I want to. I think speaking to Supervisor Bohn's concern in regard to the firepower litigation from mobile home park owners speaks to a very concerning trend, both statewide and nationwide, which is the expanding corporate ownership of our mobile home parks and affordable housing in general. And I don't know if there is a consideration for us to consider ordinances in the future to see if we can limit these out of county and sometimes out of state corporations from really
legal fees were included in this. Coming
into. I don't know why people are talking over me, but it's continuing. I just think that that's something we should be considering, and I don't know if there are other communities that have done this, because this is definitely an issue. I mean, it's not just an issue in Humboldt County. We're seeing it all over the state, and we're seeing it not just investments in corporate ownership of mobile home parks, but also housing in general. We're seeing You can see those flyers that in the communities that sometimes they're handwritten. We'll buy your house at whatever price, cash offers. We're even seeing ads. It's coming over the podcast. That trend is basically through larger investment firms that are buying up housing because of a lack of housing and that the commodity that it's created. It's created this investment pool, and again, it's centralizing ownership, and it's not good for our local economy. It's not good for housing, and we're kind of this is what we're talking about today, and what we heard reflected back to us from some of the comments speaks to that. So I know it's kind of it's a bigger issue, but I don't think it is related, and I can see where Supervisor Madrone is saying, well, this is right. We have this right, and this is important, and I agree with that. But I do want to reflect on that concern about litigation. I think that's not an unwarranted concern. Nonetheless, sometimes you do what's right, and I think even Supervisor Bohn's
Bohn, whatever.
It's really hard here sometimes. His concept or idea, like, well, why not just subsidize folks who are in this position and have a program that maybe does that instead of facing this litigation. The hard part around that is that we still wouldn't have any control over rent increases that would just keep going unless we have some form of dealing with that solution doesn't have any kind of sidebars to it. But I think it's like a good creative thought for sure. So I'll be going with the staff recommendation today. But I do think if there is a way that we can address limiting corporate ownership of our housing stock in this county in the near future as soon as possible, actually, I think that's something we should really be considering. Thanks.
Take a vote, please.
Okay, Supervisor Bushnell.
Then ask it.
I'm curious, and I'm looking for it, and I apologize if I haven't seen it, but what is the amount that rents can go up in these parks? Is with the rent stabilization, with this ordinance?
It's tied to the CPI.
Okay. 'Cause I'm just curious that if we're going to get into another dilemma of parks deteriorating because the owners say they don't have enough money now to.
Well, that was one of the things that one of the park owners was bringing up, is that their rent increases with their improvements. Improvements can be exempted from the rent increases. So if they have to do something to improve the park, that is treated separately.
And so that.
But that
Go
has
ahead.
to be then reported and shown how that works.
So they can raise the rents if there needs to be maintenance to the park, despite this ordinance?
Improvements.
Improvements?
Not common maintenance. Yeah.
Oh, improvements.
Yeah.
Replace pavement, potholes,
Yeah, no,
things.
I get what they are. I'm just thinking. Okay, thank you, Director Ford, and yes.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes, but I do want to emphasize that I agree with the findings of this, and I agree with the findings and what I believe to be the intent of the voters. I think that's really important here. So thanks.
Supervisor Arroyo. Yes. Chair Bohn.
And I didn't mean to speak over you, Mike, but I did. Didn't it come up that there was going to be legal fees? You had it on there for legal fees, didn't you? Recouping legal.
The recouping the legal fees is the park owner being able to recoup fees from the residents, yeah. And that's limited.
Not us, but vice versa. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
both parties, you call them the winner, but the prevailing, and then you switch to the prevailing party. That was what you were looking at, and I'm sorry, didn't mean to misspeak.
So part of our implementation is tied into the $5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
We have 7 minutes, and then we'll be back here to adopt the climate action plan. What's that? No, I know there's more than that. I'm just, the rest of the agenda, but we'll finish with number 4 since John is here already, is what I was going to do.
Can we have 15 minutes, please?
15 minutes in. My co-chair has requested it. You ready? Eric, let's go.
Good afternoon, Chair Bohn, members of the Board of Supervisors, John Ford and Megan Escobedo with the Planning and Building Department to bring back before you the Humboldt Regional Climate Action Plan. And I do have a presentation. So I'd like to show this slide just to remind everybody that this really is a regional approach. It's not just the county, but we have many partners who are equally participating in this, and appreciate that. So what you're being asked to do today is to accept the red-lined Regional Climate Action Plan as the EIR project description. We previously brought this forward to the board on the 24th of September. With the same request, the board did ask that we bring back any changes that would come out of the public comment period for the board's consideration, and so that's what we're presenting today. Since the board has seen this during the 30-day period, we've received 18 written comments, and there have been presentations to all the city councils, I believe, except for Blue Lake, which will be this evening. We've also presented to HCOG. So some of the changes that have come about as a result of the comments, and these are itemized in the board report and shown as red line stricken text within the draft of the RCAP itself that have been provided to you this morning or this afternoon. The first is the definition of urban area that was a little bit vague before. And so we chose to use something that's used relative to most of the housing law that's implemented, and that's the area that's identified as urban clusters. This comes out of the 2020 census. And so we've identified that by definition and also included a map. The map that's included right now is a little hard to see. We'll, before a final version comes out, provide a more clear map and make that much more visible. Second is the comments that the project manager can't do this all by themselves. And so we did make some changes to the text to reflect that the project manager really reflects a larger organization, number of staff people that will be supporting this effort. The other, some of the other changes is to require that when development occurs, that multimodal transportation features be added in, and when roads are improved, that multimodal transportation features be included. The encouragement to do away with single-use packaging. And we also included a new section on refrigerants, and this did not set limits on the number of, or the amount of refrigerants used or allowed to leak, as we really don't have good baseline information on that. We need more information, so it really is, the action there is to study that and develop an approach to addressing the use of refrigerants. We did not make some changes to many of the comments that were made. Some of them we didn't change because they've already addressed within the document itself. Some of them were more expansive than what the document was trying to do. Some of them really were kind of were a little bit polarizing, and for purposes of the draft EIR, frankly chose not to put in things that are going to polarize people. And so one of those was to have the desire to have the CEQA compliance checklist done, and we do recognize that as a need that will be done before the RCAP is brought back for hearing consideration. A lot of that will come out of the work on the final EIR, and so the reason that it's not available at this point is just because of the need to really do that as part of the environmental process. There were also comments that we are not aggressive enough in reducing vehicle miles traveled relative to existing development. And a lot of this has to do with enhancing alternative forms of transportation, whether that be public transit, whether that be pedestrian bicycle transit, whether that be other things that are available, including rideshare. We actually thought that we were trying to be pretty aggressive on that, since 73% of the CO2 emissions are related to transportation. So a lot of the focus is on reducing VMT. There is concern with the use of biofuels, and one of the things that became clear in discussion, at least with our consultant, is that there are different types of biofuels that raise different levels of concerns. It's not one size fits all. So we really will be taking a look at biofuels and which ones are not carbon neutral or minimize the emissions of carbon. Some of them seem to have some undesirable effects, and so we will be differentiating between those. And there was a requirement for 100% decarbonization of municipal buildings by 2024. That's not something that's really been discussed. It certainly could be added. That's something that could be incentivized, but without really presenting that to all the different jurisdictions to have them agree to that, did not feel like that would be an appropriate thing to spring on the different partners that we have. There was also a comment to end all natural gas flow by 2045. And while we are definitely moving towards the use of electricity and away from natural gas, to say that you can't have it anymore and to stop the gas flow may have some unintended consequences. There were comments too that we're not being assertive enough with converting residential buildings. On the one hand, there was a comment that 4% reduction is not aggressive enough, and another comment that said we're not addressing decarbonization of residential buildings. And I think one of the important things, and this is an overarching comment that exists in everything that's being done here, is that it's got to be achievable. And so the 4% may seem like a small number, but it's believed to be something that's done in the normal context of rehabilitating residential structures, rehabilitating residences, rather than doing something that would be out of sequence. There was also some concern with the use of hydrogen and the direction of hydrogen, and that's really something that needs to be studied more, because hydrogen is viewed, while release of hydrogen may be a greenhouse gas, the use of hydrogen for an alternative fuel source to power especially large vehicles is viewed with high favor. Then there's a couple of comments on offshore wind. We tried to clean that up a little bit to make it clear that we do understand that the offshore wind in and of itself is going to be occurring. But then how does it get made available to the county as a whole? We do have some infrastructure struggles, and there have been some good things that have happened recently, up to including a substation being planned for Humboldt County, and that may create some opportunities, but there's more opportunities that need to be taken advantage of, and I'm not sure the CAP can completely envision all of that. One of the other things that was discussed a lot was the Regional Climate Committee, and there's a lot of people who like the idea of the Regional Climate Committee, and they also like HCOG serving as the Regional Climate Committee, and HCOG itself was presented with this idea, and they directed staff to evaluate their ability to do that. So the recommendation today is to review the changes, identify any changes that you would like to see in addition to those that have been provided, and then authorize this draft of the Regional Climate Action Plan to serve as the project description. I want to be really clear on something. The board is not approving the Climate Action Plan today. This is just accepting this draft to be used for the EIR. There's still the opportunity to make changes. There's still comments that we want to research. We want to understand the science behind some of the comments, make sure we understand it before we start making changes. And so this is not a closed door. This is the end. This is just, need to, from a timing perspective, get on with preparing the EIR. So that we can get to the hearing where some of these final decisions will be made about what elements are in it and what elements are not within the RCAP. That concludes our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Bring it back to the board. Supervisor Arroyo.
So thank you for clarifying that last point. I think that's really important, and I think community members who commented on this may have also been under the impression that we were adopting the plan. Could you say a little bit more about, I see quite a lot in here about the comments that were incorporated and from whom, and I think that's extraordinarily helpful. Could you say a little bit more about the process and what we're going to see moving forward from here?
Yes, so thank you for that opportunity to explain that a little bit more. So as we move forward, we will take and use this. This will be the project description within the EIR. And then we'll be working with RINCON to explore some of the comments that have been made. We're trying to set up a meeting, frankly, for Thursday morning to address some of that. And then to really understand how does it fit in with the overall framework of what's been proposed. Does it help? And if it does, we'll continue to massage that. We're not planning on making huge changes to this without it going through the EIR process and probably responding to comments that are made on the EIR on the draft through the public review process of the EIR. It's normal for a project to have modifications made going into the adoption process where the final EIR identifies how better to respond to certain comments. And so we're getting a little bit of a head start on that right now with some of the comments that have been made. What we plan to do is to really be able to respond to the public comments, respond to those formally, and identify why it's a good or a bad idea. And if it's a good idea, incorporate that into the draft. If it's not something that we would necessarily support, we would be bringing both a modified draft back and the comments that have been made for consideration of the board, whether or not you want to add those or not. So everything that's been commented on, everything that's been changed will be presented to the board for your consideration, with both changes that have been made and changes that have been requested but not made. And we expect that to happen not later than June of '25.
Okay, so people will have notification about multiple opportunities to provide comments on this draft.
Yes.
And there will be at least a couple more meetings that we'll have here to incorporate versions of that. Is that true?
That is true. So this is something that will have various public interfaces. The next big public interface is putting out the draft environmental impact report.
Mhm.
People will be given the chance to review this draft of the RCAP and the EIR, be able to comment on that.
Okay.
So then we'll get that information back. We'll prepare the final EIR, which will take all the comments, respond to all the comments, and make any needed changes to the RCAP, and then that will go back and start the public hearing process at the Planning Commission before it gets to the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, and so if we are receiving comments that you are not included on, or we can't tell that you're included on, I would assume you would like us to send them your way?
We would very much
Okay.
appreciate receiving those.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Anybody else? Public comment first.
I have no callers.
You just queue up and get in line to speak. We have a popper. Okay.
Hi, I'd like to make another comment for 350 Humboldt, and I do appreciate that there is going to be ample opportunity during the EIR process, but I'll just take a couple minutes and beat everybody to the punch. So I just want to focus on two basic sections of the RCAP. We appreciate the added section on refrigerants, investigating those. It had been overlooked in the previous version, and action in this sector could help us achieve our greenhouse gas reductions. The section about biofuels, however, continues to concern 350 Humboldt. The new RCAP stresses that Humboldt has a tremendous potential for biofuels. Unfortunately, biofuels are not a climate solution in the long run, and in the short run are likely to impede rapid electrification, which is a climate solution. And also the latest low carbon fuel standards from the state are limiting subsidies to biofuels over the next 20 years. And without subsidies, biofuels are not economically viable, so they're not a good investment. Also, biofuels sourced from wood can be a real can of worms because biomass utilization so often incentivizes logging. The rigor needed to guarantee that feedstock is solely sourced from genuine wood waste is hard to come by. Without that guarantee, wood-sourced biofuels on a large scale are bad for both the climate and possibly air quality if we're talking about incineration. Finding a variety of applications for genuine wood waste is of paramount importance because we do have a lot of waste biomass around here. But first, the fatal flaws of most current biofuel technologies must be acknowledged. 350 Humboldt recommends consulting with people who have studied this complex issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, and we've got a popper on there that just popped up. My little helpers are telling me.
I did, but they unraised their hand.
Yeah.
So
You put your rat.
8912, if you want to go, please raise your hand again. I take that as
All right.
a no.
I'll bring that back to the board.
They just re-raised their hand.
You put your right foot
8912.
in, you take your right foot
I'm going
out.
to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Sorry about the technical problem. My name is Matt Simmons. I'm the climate attorney at the Environmental Protection Information Center. And I just want to ask the board to accept this draft of the Regional Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Bohn. I want to first, there was a comment in relation to the sentence in here, Humboldt County has a tremendous potential for biofuels. And the examples that were all given are from waste streams, so maybe that sentence could be modified to specifically call out waste streams so that there's not confusion in that. Okay. And then there was the term timberland in here, and I don't know if you guys got to that where it talked about kind of like everything is timberland. That's not, it's like urban and timberland. So I was just kind of wondering, there's no definition of timberland in here. So I'm hoping that can be addressed. It just basically said non-urbanized and then timberland, the way that it's in this report. So
we'll look at that and provide a definition of timberland.
Okay. And then there was, I think you had mentioned there's a sentence in here that identify roads in rural areas that with improvements could allow for adequate public transit. And so I think there's some people are a little confused about just making roads better is not really the driver for public transit in general. That's not what drives it. So I want to make sure that we're not making that as like some sort of high prioritization for public transit. Public transit is generally around population location and how accessible that is, and so I don't know. I haven't really heard of any. Being on HTA, we haven't had any discussions around, hey, if the road was better, we would be able to access those populations more. Usually it's around whether it's just efficient in terms of, whether we have the resources to get there and if there's people to actually move around. So I just want to, I don't know where that might get addressed, but I think I just don't want to have us stray.
We'll take a look at that. Maybe that didn't fit in, and maybe that either needs to be reworked or eliminated.
Okay. And then besides that, I think all the changes that you talked about, and especially around the refrigerants and the complete streets, which you didn't call out specifically, but you talked about multimodal in terms of those are both really important improvements, and so I'm really happy about those. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first, I want to thank staff for their work in adding the comments that were made at previous meetings as well as the public meetings that have occurred. I think you've done a great job there of incorporating those suggestions, and I appreciate that. As far as rural roads and the condition of roads, it's also site-specific. For instance, West Haven Drive, I believe, would be considered to be a rural road. But there's a really gnarly corner that's like a 280-degree bend that is very hazardous for the buses and for local residents. Luckily, Director Madsen is going to be working with his team from that area to actually widen that turn and make it safer. But that particular turn has been an impediment to transit to the point where at times there's been a suggestion that that part of the route might be eliminated. So there certainly are conditions, site-specific conditions, where improvements to roads could absolutely help and or increase the ability of transit to operate in those areas. So it's real specific. I mean, we're not going to be taking transit out the Matoll Road, although some people might like to have something out there at some point. And road conditions get a little better thanks to the $1 million that we allocated more recently, but
not enough to take a bus on.
No, definitely not. I used to take the HSU bus out there, and it was kind of nail biting. Anyway, so it's very site specific. So how somehow addressing that. So just a statement about it really depends on the site-specific conditions and where improvements can be made that increase transit availability. I think that's a good thing to look at, but it's certainly not a across-the-board type of a thing, right? Tremendous potential for biofuels. That one also, one of the reasons that was stated here, as well as other times, about biofuels not being economically sustainable is because there's so much transportation involved, because we do these industrial projects that centralize the location of the biomass conversion, which then requires a tremendous amount of transportation in order to haul it to that industrial plant. And that's where you go into a carbon positive, situation where it's a negative. It's funny, carbon positive is negative, carbon negative is positive, or whatever. So it really matters. And also the condition of those facilities. So if you have a brand new state-of-the-art biomass conversion facility, it's very different in terms of air pollution as compared to an aging old plant that's continuously breaking down and having emission control issues, right? Our technology has come a long way since we built Ultrapower out in Blue Lake in the 1980s. And so, the one plant that we still have is pretty aging as well and has issues. So it's important to recognize that it really has to do with how good their emission controls are and how well they can maintain them. But in general, I think when we develop industrial approaches to biomass conversion, we're going to run into that particular issue. For instance, North Fork Lumber out in Corbell, they took over the Green Diamond plant out there and is producing Douglas lumber. They produce a tremendous amount of biomass, or milling waste. And they haul that all to Anderson over in the Central Valley, because that's where Frank Schmidbauer has his biomass conversion plant, right? So for him, trying to keep it within his loop of his businesses, hauling all that to Anderson is what he's doing. And so we did work with the Forest Service and some other entities to do a feasibility analysis of putting in a biomass plant in Corbell, state of the art, but it didn't pencil out for a number of reasons. So we're still hauling all that stuff 3 hours away at great carbon cost, right? Very bad equation. But there are things like when you're thinning and living on your own land and you produce some firewood and burn it in your own wood stove, if you're in a rural area, that's a pretty tight little knit circle of biomass conversion. The other thing is that there's now mobile biomass conversion systems that have been developed called curtain burners, and you can actually pull the curtain burner into the landing where all the biomass is being produced, or the thinning waste, and you can convert it right on site. And they actually have an energy plant you can hook up to the curtain burner and produce electricity. What we're missing is the battery trailer to be able to download that into a battery trailer that then would be the only thing that would leave the site, would be the battery trailer to go down the road to the grid and upload it to the grid and come back empty, so to speak, and keep doing that. So it's not for everything, but we're starting to do more and more of that out in Willow Creek and other areas, and CAL FIRE has one of these units. They don't have the energy plant, but they do have the curtain burners. So technology around biomass conversion is continuously changing. I do think that there are appropriate circumstances for its use when done properly with the right equations, but we got a ways to go on all that. I mean, I always look at a lot of these forests are going to burn if we don't do something. So we do need to do forest thinning and forest health work, and there's going to be this byproduct. But often when you do industrial size stuff, it's it's like the tail starts wagging the dog, and you start overcutting and starting to feed, the beast, so to speak. So a lot of, kind of cautions around all of that, but I think that it's a piece of the puzzle if it's done properly. So those are my main comments at this time. Thank you.
Supervisors Madrone, or Bushnell?
Second bite.
Thank you. I appreciate the changes, and I really do appreciate the letters that came in and that you added those so that we had content. I do want to say around the biomass and around the logging, comments that, CAL FIRE does regulate logging a lot, and that you can't just go in and clear your forest and biomass it. It doesn't work that way. And very restrictive. Clear cutting is not allowed except for a 20-acre section in large amounts. And so, I hope commenters and public, before they assume that they investigate that and know that logging is very restrictive, and what you can do, and also what can be biomassed. So I appreciate staff, including all the updates that were talked about in the board meeting previous to this, and that articulated all of our board thoughts, and I appreciate that.
Supervisor Arroyo.
I don't have much to add. I appreciate the incorporation of comments, and I think there'll be more round of comments and more opportunity, but I think it makes sense timeline-wise for us to move forward with adopting this as is, so that we can move along through the process. And I think that it's been very clearly stated by staff and community members in this board that we want to move forward with this process expeditiously, because it's taken quite a long time. So in light of that, are we ready for a motion? I'll move approval of the draft as presented.
Second, and just for clarification on the subject matter of the rural roads and transit, I think improvements may, if we actually include that to be, when we think about bus stops or other sort of specific transit specific improvements, that might be more clarifying in what we're talking about, rather than just maintenance. Thanks.
Can you say that again, Mike? I'm sorry.
What I'm saying is that when we're talking about when identify roads in rural areas with improvements would allow for adequate. So with improvements, I think some people might think improvements is just like the road, but I want to clarify that maybe it's like bus stops or pullouts or places, actually functional infrastructure for the purposes of transit. That's what I'm getting at.
I do. May I?
Please.
I just, I hear a lot of discussion around rural transit and rurally not being able to access because of road conditions. And I drove a school bus for 13 years on very rural roads. They're 40 feet long, 10 foot wide, same as the transit buses. They go to many places all over Humboldt, dirt roads, and do just fine. And so, if there was availability and need, I guess would be, first. Most of all the roads in Humboldt County, I think all of them are accessible by buses. And I just want to make a clarification there.
No, and I think anything to do with HTA, I think we're 28% of the board of HTA, so I'm sure you guys can have a little bit of influence in there as this moves forward. So as we move forward, I'll save most of my comments and give them to you, because we have a long comment period. So in the essence of time.
Yeah, I concur with what Supervisor Bushnell said. Not to belabor, but I had the privilege of traveling in central Chile. The country was Chile a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I have to tell you, the whole region looks like Humboldt County. The roads, the agriculture, the whole thing. And there, every hour, there's a bus that goes and picks people up and drops people off all over the place. And as Supervisor Bushnell mentioned, school buses are a form of public transit. They're very specific and targeted, but they go all over the place. So I think, our idea of what can and cannot get someplace is just by our own constructs about what it is. So I appreciate the conversation, and thanks to the chair for letting me talk on about it. Thanks.
Yes.
Chair.
And you fire other people up. Supervisor Madrone.
I really appreciate those comments. I used to drive buses as well out to Butler Valley and Maple Creek in the day. One of the other, I guess, is a great opportunity to say, that's why I would recommend that people support Measure O, because there is some amount of that could go to transit. And I'm not sure that our restrictions on transit in these rural roads has more to do with the roads than it has to do with funding. So if you want to see more transit, Measures O is one of those ways that we're promising to try and help make that happen. Unabashed.
People want roads fixed. All right, I think we can probably, and do remember there were 59 biomass plants at one time operating in California. I think we're down to 21, so.
Probably 500,
I didn't get to speak at all, Michelle, so I thought I'd throw a little bit in there. Take the vote, please.
500 teepee burners too.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes, and just wanting to remind the public that this is not adopting the cap. This is moving the process down the line.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Chair Bohn?
Let's get this wagon rolling.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, John. I want to bring back our.
Thanks, John.
I think they can interpret me as easy as anybody. Thank you, Tracy D'Amico, our clerk of the board.
Hi. So before you, I have two items this morning. The first item is to consider making the at-large appointment for the Forestry Advisory Committee. This was due to a resignation of Mike Lamori, who relocated out of the area. So the vacancy was posted and we accepted applications, and there were two applications, Gary Ryerson and Russell Durval. They were both notified of the meeting today. I know Gary was online at one point. I'm not sure if he's still there. And Russell was going to try to make it if it was in the morning, but I'm not sure if he made it either. So this is for a 4-year, or actually it's to finish the term that Mike had. And if you have any other questions, otherwise you may speak to the candidates.
And Tracy, as always, thank you for keeping on top of all these so well. I know all the people on the committees appreciate the phone calls and the reminders. With that, we'll listen to what Mr. Ryerson has to say. And if Mr. Dorval is on, made it. Let's go with Gary.
I'm going to unmute you, Gary.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Gary Ryerson, registered professional forester number 2117. And as if you've read my application, you know I have previously sat on the Forest Review Committee for several years and appreciated my time on it. And I've reapplied primarily because of my involvement in Farm Bureau, and I'm currently the chair of Buckeye and have been a board member of the Buckeye for several years and hope to continue doing that. So I appreciate the opportunity to reapply to the committee. My background is I have a pretty extensive background in forestry regulation and forestry administration. I've taught at Humboldt for I think this is my 25th year teaching at forestry administration and ethics, excuse me, and spent many years at Board of Forestry meetings and Fish and Game Commission meetings and other things, and feel like I have a pretty good handle on the regulation of forestry in California and the policies that affect that, and have a pretty good understanding of how we do that in Humboldt County. So appreciate your consideration for that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Nope, I don't see any, Gary. Thank you again for willing to step up. I know you're in the, I guess you call it retired state, but you don't seem very retired. So thanks, Gary.
No, I'm still a part-time instructor at Humboldt. I'm teaching 2 courses this semester.
Yep, great. And did Russ Dorval make it on there?
I'm not entirely sure. I do have a hand raised, but I don't know who it is.
Why don't you ask him?
Oh, it is? Okay. 7718, are you Russell?
I take it that's a no if he didn't respond. All right, thank you.
I think he may have.
He had to go out in the
I think he had some other engagements this
He had to go
afternoon,
out
but
and-
his application was also attached for consideration.
Yeah.
And I do work with Trevor Eslow. I'm not sure if he's on the line, but he manages this committee, and he also has reviewed the applications as well, if you had questions for him.
Did he have a suggestion, or did he just review them?
No,
Okay.
it's board discretion.
I understand. Thank you. I'll bring it back to the board. Public comment?
7718, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Ken Sawatsky, I read both the resumes, and I think you're lucky to have 2 really good people applying for this. Hopefully the one who's not appointed will go on. Having been familiar with Gary's reputation for all these years, I strongly support moving forward with him. But the other person did also have a very, very good, solid resume. We're lucky to have these people who have all the institutional knowledge, being willing to apply and be on these committees. And it's not to speak.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Thank you. I want to thank both applicants. They're both very well qualified. I attend these meetings often, not often, sometimes. And I attended when Gary was on there, and I know how valuable his thoughts were and his processes for this review committee. And for that reason, I'm going to make a motion to appoint Gary Reinerson.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other comment? Supervisor Wilson?
Yeah, I support Mr. Reinerson for this appointment. I know he's done the work, he's been there, and acknowledging that Gary and I have disagreed on issues in the past, but I will say that he's transparent and engaging, and I do want to shout out in terms of his efforts in opening up large areas of private timberlands for public use, and I think really on the forefront of that effort, and has really trailblazed, for lack of a better term, some great policy around that. And I just want to I will always be appreciative of that, and hoping we see more of it. Thanks.
That's a good point. We have a lot of people riding horses, riding bikes, doing a lot of things because of what they have done. Supervisor Arroyo?
I support this. I'm ready to vote.
I would say I wasn't sure who I was. I've known Gary since high school when he was up in Hoopaw. But I was looking at Russ Dorval also, because fresh eyes, very well qualified, good friend of Gary's. Works for, much like Gary did, an operating timber company with multiple employees, and brings an avenue to that. So I would really request Russell to keep his application alive if something else moves, because I can't remember, this is usually a big deal, and it is. I will vote for Gary because I like Gary, but Russ Dorval is a good man and would represent our county and the working timberlands very well. So with that, I'll take a vote.
Supervisor Arroyo?
Yes.
Supervisor Madrone?
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Yes.
Supervisor Bohn?
He's back.
Supervisor Wilson?
Yep.
And just to be clear, Russell's application will be valid for the next 2 years in case there are other vacancies. So thank you. So the next item before you?
That was yes on Gary, by the way. I'm just saying he served so many years before us.
Yes. Are you ready to move on to the next
I'm under
item?
medication.
Okay. So the next item before you is the annual appointment to the CSAC Board of Directors. CSAC solicits this appointment prior to the beginning of the calendar year so that the county representatives can be present and be engaged in voting at the annual CSAC conference in November. This year, they've asked for those appointments by the beginning of November. Currently, the member is Michelle Bushnell, and the alternate is Natalie Arroyo, and it's up to your board to make that appointment.
Nobody wants to say a word. I will.
Hello?
Oh, okay. Supervisor Bushnell.
Turn your neck. I would be interested in staying as the member if this board so chooses.
Alternate?
I'm happy to remain as the alternate.
Perfect.
So moved.
Caller 7718, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
I think this is a great combination. There seem to be different sides on the board, and I sometimes feel that's true. But I think these people both represent us really well. And I'm quite confident neither of them are going to piss off Elon Musk. So I just had to throw that one in there. Well, in the speaker.
There you go. All right. It's been moved. Supervisor Madrone?
Yeah. I very much appreciate your serving on this, representing the board on CSAC. I think you do a great job, and I know, Natalie, you've attended as well at times and participated, so thank you both for that representation. I was thinking, my own role on some of my committees and boards that I sit on, that I represent the board, that I understand that at one point in the past, many years before I was on the board, that board members would do kind of a report on the agenda of their activities on committees and boards, but it started to become a very lengthy thing is what I understand. Tracy, you were probably here. Rex, you were here then also. So I don't think we want to go back to that, because you can end up with grandstanding or all kinds of things happening. But I do think there are times and places that when we're on a particular board, if there's something that comes up that might be controversial or may not have the full support of the board, that it might be good for us to bring those items back to the board to seek, input from the board as a whole, because we really do serve at the will of the board. And I don't want to make it complicated or anything, but sometimes things come up. So, Tracy, I see you.
I was just going to say that in the past, we did do that at one time. When I bring the board protocol and the new appointments for the next calendar year, that could be a discussion we have on if, once a month, the supervisor wants to share what they've been attending and what that looks like. We can add that into the boards and commissions appointment item when it comes forward in December.
And maybe keep it to 5 minutes so we don't get out of control or something. I
Sure.
don't know. 5 minutes each, whatever.
Well, one of the Supervisor Bushnell. No, you're fine, please.
I just would like to respond to that as the voting member for CSAC. I know that I represent this board and not myself or my district, that I'm representing the county as a whole. And oftentimes we do get our agenda previous to, and I can speak with my the alternate about that. And but I do always take into consideration that it's not my vote, and it's not just my district's vote, that it's the county's vote as a whole. And I also just want to say that, like RCRC and CSAC, we get reports from them. They come to our board and give us reports. And those meetings also can be, CSAC anyways is online on Zoom. So if there is another board member that's curious what's going on, they can attend. And then I also just wanted to add one more thing, that Natalie chairs a committee for CSAC, and I've attended those meetings and appreciate her doing that and her thoughts there.
And I've just so you know, this was something that came up 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and what we did is, with the age of everything, our agendas are completely on the website, and our finished agendas and how we vote. The idea, if there's something controversial coming up, we get our agenda about 10 to 12 days before our meeting. It's going to be pretty hard to get it on our agenda, vote on it, decide on it, and then take it back. So the nice thing about it is the board I sit on is 40 counties. CSAC is 58. And we have been well represented. I mean, we had one year where Supervisor Bass and I were both chairs, which is the first time that had ever happened, you know, and we have not been chair of CSAC but 2 times. Anyway, not very much in 100 and some odd years. So I think most of that information you're looking for is online. And again, Executive Director Blacklock was up here about 10 weeks ago, and he'll be up here again next week if you know, I called him and he's already agreed that he will be here. So we'll try to get it on our agenda. Supervisor Wilson.
Also of note is that any of the policy committees of these organizations, you can, as individual supervisors, sign up for their emails that they put out. And honestly, just a secret, if you want influence on the policy, it's actually at the when they first put it out, and you put your opinions in. Then it's far less when you're actually at the meeting. So there you go. I'm glad we brought this up, and I do think that maybe at some point we could do a quarterly something or another. But yeah, I do remember those being very long and arduous discussions, and so that's why we don't do them as much anymore.
I don't think any of you guys remember, we used to sit up here and talk about what we did for the week. And everybody'd have to write down, well, I went to this meeting, and I went to this skunk breeding, and I went to this, and I went to that. Everything we went to, we had to say that we went to, and then it got to be a very elongated thing. So that's why you can put it into any of your time up here, you know, obviously. But their websites are very, 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 very more advanced than they were 12 years ago. So we can get a lot of that information right online. And I think some of you get emails. I see you on emails with RCRC. So I think they do send out quite a bit of emails. So, Supervisor Madrone.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I very much appreciate the comment you made, Supervisor Bushnell. I know we all take that role very seriously. So it was not meant as disparaging to anybody. And I know you didn't take it that way, but I very much appreciate you stating it. With that, I'll make a motion to appoint Supervisor Bushnell as our member representative and Supervisor Arroyo as our alternate.
I'll demote my my motion to a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a lot of enthusiasm.
Didn't catch that, sorry.
Oh, Supervisor Arroyo.
I just wanted to note that I continue to co-chair the Coastal Counties Policy Committee, and so if anyone ever has, so you know that meets when both the legislative conference and the annual meeting, and so I think at this next one, the topic on the agenda, the main topic will be there's always a bit of a overview from the legislative staff of CSAC. And from the Coastal Commission, but we'll likely be looking at some of the housing-related bills in the coastal zone at that particular meeting. So if anyone has thoughts or concerns or wants to join that at the annual meeting, please do. But since I co-chair that and will continue to go, they don't have hybrid stuff for CSAC yet most of the time. So I will continue to be going. So it's a really nice pairing for Michelle and I to be able to tag team in case something comes up and you can't be there. So thanks.
Yeah, I don't think I've missed one. And sometimes they get a little heated, but in 12 years, I don't think I've missed one. So, and they are very interesting. So I know our Coastal Commission members, if I know Supervisor Wilson goes or tries to make it most of the time. And before that, Ryan would always try to make it. So anyway, yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking at him.
Closed session. Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Yes, again.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Yes, and thank you to my board.
Chair Bohn.
And yes. And thank you for allowing to do this one more time, Supervisor Bushnell. City Council?
Thank you, Chair Bohn. It is the intention of the board to meet in closed session pursuant to California Government Code, Section 54957.6, in order to review the county's position and instruct its designated labor negotiators.
Is there any public comment on this? Seeing one?
Yes. 7718, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 3 minutes.
Kim Swatsky won't need 3 minutes. I will always speak up for the in-home health care workers. They can't afford, they're kind of on the bottom of the labor thing, and I know I see some of your organizations making large donations to certain, like Madrone or something like that, but these people can't afford it, so I will always have their back and make love to speak and see whatever you can do for them that's appreciated. Lastly here, I don't miss those slideshows and you guys talking about your stuff for 30 minutes every meeting on what you did during that week or 2 weeks. Thank you, back to you to speak.
I didn't hear him, but, and well, I'm waiting to see if there's any public comment out in the crowd. Seeing none, we will go immediately into closed session.
Thank you, Chair Bohn. There was no reportable action taken with regard to item K1.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll be adjourned.